Good evening. This study session for the Board of Education for February 17th, 2015 is called to order. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone present and to our television viewers. The meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times, and the meeting is also being streamed live on our PPS TV services website. Director Morton is absent this evening, and just want to say appreciation to all the folks who are here tonight that you're keeping your signs down low so those behind you can see you. Thank you very much, and keeping the aisles clear. The fire marshal appreciates that. So first off, as part of our agreement with the Portland Association of Teachers, they are provided time on the agenda of each regular board meeting for brief comments if they wish. And so tonight we are going to be hearing from PAT President Gwen Sullivan. Gwen, there she is. Welcome, Gwen.
Thank you. Didn't know I was first. I get to kick off the meeting tonight.
Great.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I am honored to, of course, represent nearly 4,000 educators in Portland. Sometimes people think about that 4,000, and it's around 3,300 of our certified folks, and then we also represent anywhere to 800 to 1,000 substitute teachers as well. But tonight I'm here to, I wanted to talk to you about the impact of high stakes testing, in particular the Smarter Balanced Assessment, and the effects that it will be having on our students and what we as a community should be doing about it. So I wanted to start by saying thank you to this board. Last July, you guys were very clear where Portland Public Schools stand, unanimously adopting a resolution to ensure that teaching, and this is, quoting this, that to ensure that teaching and learning in Portland Public Schools are focused on education of the whole child and not teaching to a test. You made it clear that testing shouldn't dominate the culture or instructional time in our schools. And at that time, you voted that our district would not use the state's new Smarter Balanced test to evaluate schools, students, or teachers until the test was demonstrated to be valid and reliable and culturally relevant. In October, again, you stood by that commitment and adopting the common sense recommendations from PAT members and district officials that Portland Public Schools not set targets as part of the state-mandated achievement compacts until the Smarter Balanced Assessment could be properly evaluated. And for PAT members who were part of that process, the logic was pretty simple, that not only do we need to know whether the test is actually reliable before moving forward, that we also know that setting improvement targets was impossible without baseline data. So we know it's our responsibility to Portland students, all of Portland students, that we have a responsibility to educate students, and that has not changed. So let's talk about what is in the best interest of our students when it comes to the Smarter Balanced Assessment. First of all, in July, you noted that the use of an unreliable or invalid Smarter Balanced Assessment could undermine student enthusiasm for learning, could create devastating outcomes for schools, and could set schools and communities back years. And you also called on the state to provide sufficient time to ensure the reliability of the test. And I will tell you, I'm a little more than concerned because it is February 17th, and the state's outside contractor, the American Institute for Research, hasn't produced any sort of validity report yet. You would think that an organization that the CEO of this nonprofit that makes almost $1 million a year would have enough resources to ensure that Oregon lawmakers, educators, and parents had everything they'd need to make informed decisions when it comes to the Smarter Balanced Assessment. But we are still waiting. Meanwhile, we are about to do the very thing this board said it didn't want to do. Namely, give students a test that we don't know is valid, reliable, or culturally relevant. And what's worse, we're plowing ahead, given everything we already know about the Smarter Balance assessment. Although we have no evidence about the Smarter Balance assessment, it being valid and reliable or culturally relevant, we do know a few things about this test. We know that it's going to take a minimum of 7 hours to administer, and that is being generous. Teachers that I have talked to say it'll be taking closer to double that amount of time. And that says nothing about the weeks of preparation that our teachers are being asked to put in to get ready for this test in the first place. I hear stories every day about how the Smarter Balance assessment is already siphoning resources away from well-rounded curriculum that includes art and music, dance, drama, physical education, and world languages, and how it's cutting into time that we need to do what is best for our students. We need to do what we do best, which is teach students in an individual and culturally relevant manner. Third, we know that the test will tie up computer labs and technology specialists for months. And most important, I think about a personal story where the parents at Abernathy Elementary School who organized a tech trek instead of a Run for the Arts. They organized a tech trek because they didn't have enough technology in the school to integrate technology into the classrooms. So they organized this fundraiser, they did all of this hard work, and now the technology will be taken away for a couple months for standardized testing. And this was a valuable resource that was supposed to be available for all students to use and to learn from, but this will not be available. Fourth, and most important, what we do know is factual, is that 60 to 70% of our students will fail this test. We've heard it from the Oregon Department of Ed and even the state superintendent. That if that is not something that will undermine student enthusiasm and create devastating outcomes for schools, then I don't know what is. No teacher, or administrator for that matter, would ever give a test that we knowingly will fail 60 to 70% of our students. It's not education, frankly. For many PAT members, it feels more like abuse. Now, I know that that might sound a little bit provocative, saying that it would be abuse, but after the 7th or 8th time a teacher says to me, I went back to the materials that we look at every single year as educators. We're required to take a state-mandated child abuse training. And I looked at some of the documents, and one document describes a form of abuse as mental injury or psychological mistreatment, the result of cruel or unconscionable acts that impair a child's psychological, cognitive, emotional, and or social well-being. These include things like habitual ridicule and scapegoating. So I ask all of you, what do you think the psychological and emotional impact will be when 60 to 70% of our students will be labeled as failures? Especially after all the anxiety and fear that we've seen in running up to these high stakes tests. Can you tell me that there's not going to be any risk of scapegoating if our high poverty schools are labeled failures? What assurances can you make families who don't speak English as their first language that they won't be blamed for poor test scores or be ridiculed for being different in the way the Smarter Balance assessment doesn't value? The more I think about it, the more I think our teachers are right and that it is abusive to kids. And I understand more and more why PAT members feel like they are being asked to violate their ethical responsibility as educators when they are forced to administer these tests. Our state training on child abuse is clear about one of our key roles as educators. It is to be the adult in the situation and take steps to end the abuse. I would ask the school board to shoulder that same burden when it comes to the pain and suffering that these assessments can inflict. So Next, I think it's important to talk about getting our families, our parents, our students information. Not propaganda, but information. And the first place is to start by providing parents with real information about the Smarter Balanced Assessment and what it means for our kids and what their rights are to make decisions in their child's best interest. There are staff people from the district who are going around to different schools to talk about the Smarter Balanced Assessment with parents. I was recently at a meeting with one of them at my daughter's school, and I can tell you firsthand the information the district is providing to parents is all about compliance. So I'm not saying that it is advocating necessarily for, but it is definitely about compliance. But what they aren't saying is that no one is telling the parents that the kids are going to be spending weeks prepping for a test that 60 to 70% of them are going to fail. Nobody is telling them that the test has not been proven to be valid. Nobody is talking to parents about the millions of dollars that are going to be directed towards administering and grading this test, money that could have and should have gone directly into classroom instruction. And in your resolution, you stated in July, you called on district administrators to expand their effort to inform and engage parents in the community. I know in PPS we talk a lot about authentic family engagement, but I ask you, how can our engagement truly be authentic when we're not telling our ESL families, our parents in high poverty schools, the truth about what these tests really mean for their kids? In fact, I think that the district is too busy talking about compliance to give parents the cold, hard facts about the Smarter Balanced Assessment. And that's probably why my phone, as of late, has been ringing off the hook from parents from different schools all over this district. Parents at about a half dozen most recently have contacted me about the assessment, and they want to know what their rights are and what it means for kids. So in closing, I'm going to basically ask three things of the board tonight. First, to really think about why the district is spending all the time and money on telling parents about the compliance and maybe how good the Smarter Balanced Assessment is, and why we have to do it. That we should be looking at how do we honestly educate our parents about what it is and what it's not. Especially when it hasn't been proven to be valid, reliable, or free from cultural, linguistic, or socioeconomic bias. I don't come to you and say, I'm here to say that parents should opt out of testing. What I'm here to tell you is that we need to give parents all the facts, and so we can let them make informed choices about what is in the best interest of their kids. And I know for myself, my choice is clear. I'm a 20-year veteran teacher in Portland Public Schools and the parent of 2 kids in the district. And like many other educators in Portland, my husband and I are opting both of our children out of the Smarter Balanced Assessment. But once again, my goal isn't to tell other people what to do. They need to figure out what to do once they know all of the facts. People have rights. Finally, like you did last summer, I'm asking you to stand with us and not against us on this issue. We all know that there is a better way to assess kids. And later on in this meeting, I look forward to talking to you more about some of the things that we learned from our recent trip to New York and different assessment methods, as well as our assessment committee within the district. So listen to our educators, give them support they need. They're the ones who've been in the room with students when they fail, and they'll tell you firsthand that these tests are unlike anything they have ever seen. The amount of frustration and anxiety in store for our kids this spring will be staggering, knowing that 60 to 70% of them will fail. But it doesn't have to be this way. Help us make sure that we can put the brakes on the Smarter Balanced Assessment this school year. You know it's the best thing for our kids, and after all, it's about doing what's best for them. That's our job. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so at this time, we'll go ahead and have public comment. I know we have a number of folks signed up, so Ms. Houston, can you read the first two names?
Our first two, Aaron Smurl and Micah Yee.
So I'll just read quickly the instructions. Thank you so much for coming tonight to attend the meeting and provide your comments. We look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. We'll be actively listening and reflecting, but not responding directly during the meeting. But you can check in with our board manager, Roseanne Powell, who's over there in the end of the first row if you have any questions. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration of others, and complaints about individual employees should be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. So you've got 3 minutes. The green light comes on at the, please begin by stating your name and spelling your last name for the record. During the first 2 minutes, the green light is on. When you have 1 minute left, the yellow light is on, and when the red light comes on, we respectfully ask that you wrap up your comments. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Smurl, S-M-I-R-L. Hello, fellow Oregon Public School parents. Thank you for watching this short video on opting out of standardized tests. If you are a parent of an Oregon Public School student, you might have questions left unanswered about the use of Smarter Balance assessments, a new state-mandated end-of-year high-stakes standardized test in the areas of English, language arts, and math, used for grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 11. It's important to note, if you have an 11th grader, that the Smarter Balance assessment is not the only assessment that you can use to meet graduation requirements, so opting out is not a barrier to graduation. If you're going to opt out in 2015, you need to write your district a letter. According to language in the Oregon administrative rules, it needs to have 2 things in it: your reason for opting out, which currently allows for only 2, disabilities and religion. Also, they need a suggestion of an alternate education activity for your student to do during the many testing periods that will be the result of what is estimated to be a 7-hour plus testing time. An example of an alternate education activity could be assigning a book or topic with the intent of collecting a paper or book report as a work sample to be used in your student's academic portfolio. Specific to Portland Public Schools, the district is also asking that you turn in an opt-out form. I'll put links to that form in the comment section of the video in multiple languages. There are many reasons to opt out of standardized tests, and they only grow more numerous as the stakes pile up on them. Personal reasons, unforeseen ramifications of mass collection of data on minors, social justice issues like the school-to-prison pipeline. There's too many to list here in this amount of time. Here are some resources. Oregon Save Our Schools is an organization of social justice-minded parents, former and current teachers, educators, administrators, and even board members that run a blog, a Facebook page, put out monthly newsletters, and hold monthly meetings that often cover this very topic, from the school level all the way up to the state. OptOutOregon.org is a related blog, which is a great starting place for the what and why to opt out, as well as a great FAQ, or frequently asked questions. In Portland, on Facebook, PPS Parents Opt-Out Group has a growing membership where questions and discussions on all levels would be welcome. There are also several examples of opt-out letters that you can use. If you don't have time to write your own, I recommend you join. Testing has always been part of education, but some feel the high stakes associated with this current round of standardized tests is going too far, assigning punitive labels to schools with higher levels of lower socioeconomic students. Remember, no matter what your principal tells you, it is your right to opt your student out of these tests. The testing window may already be open by the time you see this video. Please, get those opt-out letters in, check the comment section for relevant links, and again, thank you for watching this video.
Thank you.
Micah Yai, Y-E-I-G-H, and I'm a parent of 2 children who Portland Public Schools who have already opted out, and I got my opt-out form on the Oregon SOS website. Portland Public Schools needs to take the lead to demand that policymakers let teachers in schools use measuring tools that actually inform teaching practice to improve student learning. And I'm hopeful that this board will take the time to do that. The Smarter Balance assessment doesn't do those things. Some assessments are designed to inform teachers and students of progress. Other assessments are designed to see how schools prepare children to meet overall goals, but the SBAC does neither. Instead, this high-stakes assessment, students Teachers and schools face tough consequences if large numbers of students fail, and as Gwen Sullivan already said, almost 70% of students will fail this assessment. Anyone who talks with young people know that 70% of kids in our school district are not failures, and I would hope that this board would reject Pearson and other corporations telling us that 70% of our children are failures. When I listen to teens talking passionately about issues related to equity or young people actively working to solve problems in their community, it makes me wonder which of these children are going to be considered failures according to the Smarter Balanced, because I don't see them as failures. And I think people who walk into Portland Public Schools knows that our teachers aren't producing failures and our children aren't failures either. There are students who need more support in their learning, and teachers and schools already know who these children are. Instead of pumping more time and money into assessing these students, and it's very difficult to find information on how much money Portland Public Schools is spending to upgrade computers and prepare for the SBAC, time and resources should be used to teach students who need more support. The test doesn't measure or promote critical thinking. Instead, it promotes rote teaching and learning, narrowing of curriculum, and it's not even linked to knowledge that students need for college and career, which was the stated goal of the Common Core standards to begin with. Instead, it's a narrowed curriculum that disenfranchises people of color and students in poverty and creates a larger achievement gap and a more scary an opportunity gap for those children. There's no evidence that this test improves classroom instruction or increases accountability. So questions abound. How much money is it costing? How much time is it going to spend? And essentially, teachers, students, and the entire system are working really hard to implement the Common Core standards, but the SBAC is flawed, and the cloud is hanging over the whole process. Educators know that it's not a reliable measure of student learning. Parents know that standardized measuring tools don't capture the complexity of their children's learning, and taxpayers want the biggest learning bang for their tax dollars, and none of these are offered through the Smarter Balanced assessment. I hope this board will stand up and just say no.
Let's see.
Our next two speakers, Chris Reiser and April Lacombe.
Welcome. Go ahead.
Reiser, R-I-S-E-R. Hello, my name is Chris Reiser. I'm a second-year teacher at Woodlawn Pre-K through 8. I love that school. Little history. I'm a history major, so just for your benefit, should you not already know, in 1983, the U.S. Department of Education, by commission of then-President Ronald Reagan, issued a report called A Nation at Risk. Reagan had formed the commission in the hopes that it would give him reason to close the Department of Education and its concomitant cabinet position, which was created by Jimmy Carter just 5 years earlier in 1977. When the report was issued, full of Cold War rhetoric about the mediocrity of schools making us less competitive than the Soviets, Reagan actually increased the education budget over the remainder of his term. Fast forward to 1989, President George H.W. Bush calls for the first National Education Summit. Two groups were present at this summit, the National Governors Association and CEOs from Fortune 500 companies. Not their proxies or staff, the executives themselves. Conspicuously absent from the National Summit on Education were educators themselves. Yet that group was charged with drafting a set of national goals for education to be met by the year 2000. Then Governor of Arkansas, William Jefferson Clinton, played a key role in that education summit. He worked on the plenary sessions, he worked on the goals themselves, editing and drafting. Then he became president. He carried that mantle. In 1996, you had the second National Education Summit. Again, there were no educators present at this meeting. This was the meeting where Louis Gerstner III, who was the CEO of IBM at the time, along with Governor Tommy Thompson from Wisconsin, I believe, formed Achieve Incorporated. This is the nonprofit organization that created the Common Core state standards. We wonder why, in 2009, 2010, there were so many states that immediately jumped on board for the Common Core state standards. How did that happen? How do we get 44 states with a massive rollout of new standards that would then be followed by new testing, and we got all 44 states on instantly? That's because of this work that was laid out by corporate executives and the National Governors Association to circumvent the federal prohibition on the creation of a national curriculum. By pushing on the governors who controlled the states, they can completely go around the idea that you cannot create a national curriculum. Why? Because the states themselves are the ones who signed on individually. Okay? So I'll wrap it up, but we should be asking questions about what the intent of these assessments are, what their provenance is, and knowing the history of these assessments. And I think that tells us a lot about the purpose. And I, as an educator standing in front of students every day, I see the deleterious effect that it has on their well-being, on their ability to focus and want to learn in school. And so I ask you guys to please put the brakes on these assessments and let's do some real-world problem solving. When we're sitting here in a world that's on fire, when 90% of the ocean's fish are gone, when 300 million gallons of toxic water are pouring into the Pacific Ocean every day, we have bigger fish to fry than making that one little indicator go up.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's April Lacombe. It's Lacombe, and I'm a parent of 2 students in Portland Public Schools, and I am opting my 7th grader out again this year as I did last year. I'm also a teacher, and I'm opting her out of standardized tests because testing is not teaching, and it's certainly not a learning opportunity. The way the tests are used are, as you have heard tonight, inequitable, and they lead to restricted curriculum and unfair punishment of schools and teachers. As a parent, I'm strongly opposed to the time spent administering the tests, as well as the negative side effects that result from focusing on these tests, such as the narrowed curriculum, teaching to the test, and time spent preparing for the high-stakes assessments. But as a teacher with 24 years of experience in Title I schools, I am outraged by the inequities in our schools that have only worsened because of the maniacal obsession with labeling schools based on their test scores. As others have mentioned tonight, opportunities for learning are being taken away instead of expanded, as vital class time where students should be engaged in cooperative learning opportunities and research are instead having their time sucked up by test prep and computer labs, as you've already heard, where students should be learning how to research and about the world around them, are usurped for testing. I see it happening at the school where I work. I see it happening at Harrison Park, where my husband teaches. The joy is being sucked out of classrooms. Students from economically disadvantaged families now make up almost half of Portland Public Schools population. As you know, many of these children live in conditions of concentrated poverty with few educational resources in their homes. Their parents face many obstacles that seriously undermine their children's opportunities to learn. And now when they come to school, they are subjected to hours of test prep as well as hours of testing, much more than my child is in a middle-class school, much more. Instead, this money that is spent on the test should go to smaller class sizes, resources, and engaging curriculum. We could make an important difference in these children's lives if we did that. ESL students with whom I work have to take an additional test, the ELPA. So not only is a great deal of their class time wasted on the ELPA, but in middle schools in particular, these ESL students, as you probably know, don't even get to go to electives because that's when their ESL instruction is taking place. So they come to school and what do they get? They get testing and they get teaching within the limits of the curriculum. They get nothing in addition. The ever-increasing social and educational needs of our society are going to lead to greater opportunity gaps, and this testing is not going to solve those problems. Please don't fail your students. Join the national movement of people saying no to high-stakes testing. Make Portland Public Schools one of the few districts in the nation that stands up and says, no, we're not going to do this to our kids.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. Hi, my name is Susan Mach, M-A-C-H. I was asked to share I'm a parent of an 8th grader at Selwood Middle School, and I was asked to share my opt-out letter. We have been opting our daughter out for the past 3 years. Nora Burkhart-Smyer will be opting out of the SBAC test this year for religious reasons. If religion is defined as a set of beliefs, ours are as follows. 1, we believe high-stakes standardized testing is unfair and inequitable. We consider public education to be society's great equalizer, yet many poor, special needs, and/or students of colors don't have an equal opportunity to perform well due to circumstances beyond their control. Nora's participation in the test would be a tacit endorsement of an unjust practice. 2, we believe high-stakes standardized testing is not a true measurement of academic growth or student learning. As educators ourselves, we recognize the importance of assessment. However, assessment should be diagnostic in nature to help teachers and students improve their skills. It should not be designed to punish educators or the schools in which they teach. 3, we believe that funding for the test robs schools of valuable resources. According to the Pew Center on the States, a national public policy research organization, the cost of standardized testing has risen from $423 million to $1.1 billion during the last decade. As state education budgets continue to shrink, funding for testing and software companies, in addition to education consultants, has skyrocketed. The increase in the number of schools labeled as failing has provided a financial windfall for those who would prefer a privatized system of education. 4, we believe our daughter to be more than a data point. Her academic and behavioral information should remain in the hands of those who are concerned with her well-being and growth, rather than edu-marketers who would use her profile to enhance their profit margin. 5, we believe education to exist beyond what can be measured by one high-stakes test with its pretense of determining career and college readiness. We live in unprecedented times in which pressing issues, global warming, income inequality, racial injustice, to name a few, demand to be faced down by smart, creative, compassionate, and most importantly, empathetic people who are not solely beholden to the workforce, but also dedicated to the task of becoming good citizens in a thriving democracy. We realize that if Selwood Middle School doesn't have a 95% participation rate, the school is in danger of losing its excellent status. We don't need the SBAC, or any test for that matter, to tell us our school is excellent. Nora is thriving because of its great teachers and wonderful programs. We fully trust the judgment of academic professionals who see her every day to evaluate her performance and challenge her to succeed. Please say no to this test. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Adam Nash Bird. It's N-A-S-H space B-I-R-D. I'm a parent of 2 children at Glencoe School. I believe that the Common Core does little to prepare children for the future that they're facing. As Chris Reiser mentioned, we are in a world that is in a lot of trouble that's going to need a lot of creative thinkers in the future to help us solve the problems that we're facing. Tests like Common Core-based tests do nothing to create critical thinkers or creative thinkers, which are the kind of people that we will need in the future. Standardized testing further does not provide a true assessment of a child's learning ability, a true assessment of a child's value, but it does provide a way to provide a loss of self-esteem to a child who has trouble on these types of tests. If you allow these tests to take place, you are doing a disservice to the children in the district. If you spend the money that is slated to be spent on so-called improvements to technology in certain schools while closing other schools, you are doing a disservice to our children. I don't need 3 minutes to finish my statement. It's pretty succinct. Common Core has never been proven to work, and the money that gets thrown into it disappears into corporate pocketbooks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you everybody for coming tonight. And I know we're all looking forward to the first two items on our agenda, which are about the same topic that everyone has been raising. So let's go right into it. So the first one is around the transition to the smarter balanced assessment. And Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this item?
I would, and actually I'm going to do a little bit about both items because both of these are looking at our assessment practices in the district. And the first item is really is an informational item about Smarter Balanced assessment and just the district's preparation for Smarter Balance. The second one will be presented by an assessment advisory group that's been meeting looking at assessment practices for the district overall, and they're coming to provide an update. So two separate things. First one, informational just about Smarter Balance. Second, really looking at assessment district-wide in all, and doing an inventory of the assessments that we currently do, why we do them, what we get from them, and really looking critically at a framework for assessment for Portland Public Schools. So I also want to just appreciate the testimony that we heard leading into these two presentations. So Joe Suggs, who is our Director of Research, Evaluation, and Assessment, and Mary Anderson, our District Testing Coordinator, will present the information on Smarter Balance. And actually, I'm going to say we did these as separate items on purpose so that we would end up with the bigger conversation not being interrupted by technical questions about Smarter Balance, because the bigger philosophical conversation is the one that we really want to engage people in. So just being clear, that's why these are two separate conversations. Joe.
Thank you. Good evening. I've been asked to give an update on the readiness of the district for Smarter Balanced. And so I will cover a few topics. You also have a packet that covers a little bit more than what I'm going to do. I'm just going to hit the highlights on what I think are some of the more critical or sensitive points. I would say in general, most schools are on track for the Smarter Balanced assessment and are continuing to prepare for testing. Our assessment team in my department is addressing specific concerns one-on-one with schools, either when they contact us proactively or because we become aware of concerns or risks, or where principals have identified risks via a survey that we recently conducted. I'll just say up front, although I'm not talking specifically about these, they're in the packet, but we have issued a number of parent communications that we've developed with our communications team. An example of the most recent one is here on the screen. So those are available on the PPS webpage.
Will we ask questions at the end of this?
Yeah, we're going to wait till the end. Let's let them get through
this.
this.
Not the assessment, the end of this.
The end of this item, yes.
Okay.
So the items I'd like to specifically comment on in terms of readiness are helping students prepare, technology needs, timelines for receiving results and related implications, and parental requests for exemptions from testing. And again, you have a packet that covers other materials in addition to that. In terms of student preparedness, Oregon is at a little bit of an advantage to some other states around the nation because, for two reasons. One, we've had computerized testing for a number of years now, and so our students are used to doing computerized adaptive testing. In addition, the testing vendor for Smarter Balanced is AIR, the American Institutes for Research, which is the same vendor that we've been using for the Oaks assessment. And the testing interface will look and feel very familiar to students because of that. There are some changes to it, to the interface itself. In particular, there are some new accessibilities that are available to all students and students who are on IEP or 504 plans. And so students need to have some ability to know how to access those tools. There are some things like online calculators, text-to-speech, and strike-through features that are available to students. In addition, there are some new item types that our students are not used to seeing in the Oaks assessment. Oaks assessment was selected response or multiple choice exclusively. The Smarter Balanced assessment includes some constructed response or short answer items, extended constructed response, which are longer item passages, and performance tasks, which are multi-paragraph essay type items. In addition, there are more computer-assisted response items like dragging items around on a grid, rearranging sentences within a paragraph, and so forth. And then there are also items that may contain more than one correct answer, or that may have multiple items embedded in a single item. For that reason, we have encouraged our schools to be sure to allow students to have exposure to the practice tests that are available. We aren't necessarily saying that students need to take the entire practice test. That's not the important thing is not getting through a practice test. It's just being sure that they've been exposed to the new item types and the new tools that are available so that they aren't seeing them for the first time in the actual test. As of February 5th, when we conducted our first principal readiness interview, about 58% of our schools indicated that they have already had or are on track to have students experience the practice test in some manner, one item or more than one item. And then while there's a practice test, and the way that it can be accessed is shown here on the screen, but while there's a practice test, a lot of these features that I've mentioned are actually built into the Common Core standards, so exposure to or demand to provide more written responses, to be able to cite resources when responding to an item and so forth, have been delivered in curriculum for a while now. In terms of technology needs, as of today, 54 of the recently purchased 66 Chromebook carts have been deployed to schools. The remaining 12, I believe, are scheduled to be delivered later this week. And then IT also has teams that are out in schools looking at existing technology in addition to these new Chromebook carts, and identifying areas where quick and inexpensive solutions may help bring additional devices into the use of schools for testing and for instruction, like adding additional memory, replacing broken mice and keyboards, and so forth. I want to briefly mention testing results. Smarter Balanced has made some preliminary achievement levels available. Again, there's a slide here that shows how to access those for those who are interested. And that's all I want to specifically say about that. If you want to know more about that, you can go there and look at it, or we can address that at another time. I do want to talk briefly about individual student results. Because there are constructed response items in longer extended constructed response items, we know that there will need to be human raters in order to score portions of this test. And because of that, test results will not be immediately available to students upon completion of tests. Estimates are between 3 to 6 weeks in most cases for getting a composite or a complete score back. Additional analysis of the field test data, including analysis by the state of Oregon, is hopefully going on soon. ODE was supposed to receive data from the Smarter Balanced Consortium back in December. As of the last I heard, which was a couple weeks ago, they still had not received those data. That has some clear implications around some topics that we've heard addressed this evening already. Also in terms of timeline for receiving results, perhaps, and especially for our high school students who may need this assessment as a way to meet essential skills requirements. We won't know what those cut scores are on this test until late summer or early fall at this point because of those delays in receiving data. The last item that I want to address is parental requests for testing exemptions. Under Oregon statute, districts are given the authority to grant exceptions from state testing upon request from parents. PPS, Portland Public Schools, has elected to allow such exemptions. So we are taking those requests from parents. As indicated also earlier under some public comment, currently students can only be exempt under state rules for religious or disability reasons. And so we have a request for exemption form that allows for those two boxes to be checked. And those are the only instances where we will accept the forms. As of the 4th of February, Portland Public Schools has received 35 such requests. There's a summary up on the screen and in the board packets. 2 of those requests, I will just point out, were only for students who did not have state testing at the particular grade level indicated. 14 of those requests were specifically for the kindergarten assessment. And then just as an update, since I know this is a couple weeks old now, we have about 10 additional requests that are pending. A lot of these are coming directly to us, and we're routing them back to the schools so that the principals are aware before we're actually logging these. So adding those 10, we have about 35 total at this point. And our department will continue to collect and monitor the requests for exemptions as they come in. And that's what I have to present at this point.
Great. All right. So I'm sure there'll be some questions or comments. Board members who'd like to start off? Dr. Buell.
I want to apologize to you, Joe, because I know what type of a outstanding person you are and how honest and straightforward, and I'm not given the opportunity to ask these. I've got this material which you flashed up, and this is incredibly imbalanced material. This is what Gwen Sullivan was talking about, that it's, and I don't imagine you wrote it, so I guess you're going to have to answer the questions. I hate to have that because I know what a stand-up guy you are, but it says the new tests measure how much students are learning. Yeah? How can we measure that when the results don't come back and we don't even know what's on the test? So yeah, now, you don't have to answer these questions, but it doesn't, that's not I don't find that an accurate statement. And then as we go down this same one, we talk about that it measures critical thinking skills. This is what we're sending out to people. That's not the case. It doesn't, you can't really test critical thinking skills. You know that as a test person, I would assume. And then we talk about test development. Thousands of teachers, including more than 500 from Oregon, helped develop the tests. We didn't have, we haven't even been able, no one's even allowed to look at the tests. How could they help develop it is a problem. And the actual development of the test was done way back with almost no teachers involved at all. In fact, the 130 people who put together the kindergarten Common Core stuff had no kindergarten teachers there. And yet we're saying thousands are involved in that, and I mean, it's not accurate, and it's really, it borders on dishonesty. I don't want to suggest, and it certainly isn't your stuff, and I wouldn't suggest it. Yeah. We took a practice test to ensure the test's accuracy and fairness. We took a practice test, but we don't have the results back, correct? So how could it possibly assure the test's accuracy and fairness if we don't have the results back? It makes no sense at all. Keep going down. Are the new tests harder, it says? They require students to think more critically, and it's harder to guess the answer. Test scores may drop at first because the expectations are higher to reflect what kids need to know. That's true, but that sounds positive. This 60% or 70% of the people who fail, that's not positive, but we're spinning it in a positive way. We should be saying, we're giving tests that corporate profiteers have put together to make sure your kids fail, to make the public schools look bad, and that's how it should actually read, if we're going to be fair and balanced. In grades 3 to 8, it says the tests are used to adjust instruction. We know that's not true because we don't even have the test back. How can we adjust instruction based on the test? Certainly not for kids, which is what it implies. It implies that we use it for individual kids. Maybe we're adjusting our instruction some way overall. Down below it says, here's the help we have for a kid comes in and he can't speak any English at all, basically, and we slap him on the computer to take the test, and we give him this help. Now, you take a kid who can just barely speak English and see if this help is going to make a difference. We're going to give him a scratch pad. We're going to give him Braille, and that would make a difference, of course, for someone who didn't seem, and we're not going to do that for some people, but I'm just reading, and closed captioning, which is good, and then we're going to give them, we're going to give them a glossary, but they might have a tough time reading the glossary. It's nice that we're doing, but how, you take a third grader who can hardly speak English, put them on a computer, give them this test, and we'll give them a glossary of the words, and you think that's going to work? It's not going to work. We've got, it talks about most schools have the computers needed for students to take the test. PPS conducting inventory and will provide additional computers to schools as needed, and that's great. But we don't mention in here that we're shutting down some labs for 2 months. We should be sending that out to the parents. By the way, your kid won't be in the computer lab for a couple months because we're shutting it down, including the library maybe. In some cases, we're shutting down libraries. That's not in our stuff. Progress report. Students, it talks again that we're going to use it to adjust instruction or supports, which we're not going to do. And it says, in school ranking, the state uses test participation to rate schools. Students who do not take the test count against their school's rating on the state report card, but only if it gets to a certain level. If they don't, one kid opting out doesn't count. It's whether you get to a certain level, but we're not telling them that on our sheet, that really it's a level thing. And then we go down to equity for students who have been historically underserved and may already face barriers to academic success. Not taking the test can compound these barriers. Now, I just think we need to, I can do the same thing with this. I've got this redlined all the way up through this one, which is another one we turned out, and I can redline, but I don't think I need to. I made the point, and I've redlined this one. As you can see, the point's been made. If you look at these, we need to have a balanced response like Gwen suggested, and I'm going to make a motion.
Okay.
I move that we instruct the superintendent to create parent communications surrounding the SBAC test that are balanced, telling both the positive and the negative difficulties with the tests, and that any future communications would meet that standard as of now. We can look at them later and so forth if you'd like.
Okay, so there's a motion that we instruct the superintendent to create parent communications about the smarter balanced assessment that are balanced, telling both positive and negative. I'm sorry, what was the last piece?
Both positive and negative, period. That's really that stuff.
Both positive and negative.
Right, including both positive and negative.
Including both positive and period. Is
It's
there a
kinda-
second?
I apologize. Go ahead.
Second.
Okay, so Steve moves, Director Bueller moves, and Director Taylor seconds. So, any discussion?
I'll speak to it.
Okay.
I apologize to the board for not bringing this forward. It just hit me that I should be bringing this forward a little bit before the board meeting. And I think we have to decide whether we want to be honest as a school district and we want to be balanced. The whole thing I've talked about these tests is being balanced. And that's what we talked about. We passed a thing that said, hey, we're worried about these tests. Let's balance them. We're going crazy pushing them, and that's all I'm trying to get to is this, in this aspect, which is so clearly unbalanced. I'm saying, okay, let's just balance this stuff out. And I trust the superintendent to do that. She'll probably call me up and say, hey, what do you think of this? And I'll go, yeah, it's not too bad.
Any other comments? Any other discussion?
I'll comment.
Yeah, Bobby.
So I'm actually going to vote yes on this. I'm going to vote yes because I think we're in a tough situation. We're already on record as having serious concerns about this test, and we're on record already that we have concerns about how the test is going to be used and what the impact's going to be on kids. And I think it's really critical for us to be getting information out to our parents, and I'm pleased that we have been. But as I looked at it, it looked pretty rosy also, and it didn't, in my opinion, really reflect as well what we've already stated some of our concerns were. So I actually would like us to be more forthright with the concerns that we have. So I'm actually comfortable with that, and I appreciate you bringing it forward.
Yes. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I think I would be a no vote, but I think I appreciate Steve's points, and I think it is. I'm looking forward to hearing actually more comments and discussion about this, as well as the assessment work group. But I think we can just tell the superintendent without going to the point of having the formal motion that's brought up at the last minute without any notice. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and vote on the motion. All those in favor, please
Could we have
indicate
a
by saying yes.
roll call, please? Roll
Oh,
call.
sure. Can we do a roll call?
Director Curler?
Yes.
Excuse me, can you please wait and let's be able to hear the roll call? Thank you. Director Curler was yes. No.
Director Belisle?
No.
Director Regan?
Yes.
Director Buell?
Yes.
And Chair Atkins.
No.
So it is a tie.
Student.
All right.
Student.
All right, so we don't have a student representative unofficially voting.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so not receiving 4 votes, the motion does not pass, but let's move on to additional comments and
Okay.
questions about this topic, because I
I
think
have
we
some
all
more
have
if
a lot
anybody
of...
else does, but I'll wait.
Yeah, let's
I'll
let
wait.
someone else have a turn, thank you. Other comments and questions around the Smarter Balanced, because I know... Oh, go ahead, Director Blisle.
I just have a comment. Just something for us to consider as we do look at the materials. I found them all really text heavy. This isn't, again, your issue. It's really text heavy, and my guess is that if I ran it through kind of a reading level indicator, that it's probably high level. And I think that we would miss a lot of our students and families that we actually are trying to communicate. So I just hope that we'll take a look at those materials and try to figure out the right level, or what kind of supports, whether it's community partners or who's working in our school to help parents understand what these are. Again, I do think that there are pluses and minuses to this, and so I want to make sure that all of our families understand that.
Thanks. Other comments?
I have
Go ahead, Bobby.
So I have two questions I wanted to ask. The first one is, as we look at all the test preparation and obviously the technology costs that we're incurring, the professional development costs, the fact that these are word problem tests rather than multiple choice, and therefore need humans to grade them, and that's costly compared to a computer grading. There's lots and lots of costs involved, aside from taking away from instructional time. Have we looked at what, and maybe this is coming in if this is coming in the next presentation with the assessment committee, one of the questions I have for the assessment committee is, what kinds of costs are we incurring that we haven't been incurring in the past when we did the OAKS testing, and who's paying for that? And is the state helping us, and how much? So is it appropriate to wait for the assessment group to respond, or Joe, do you want to take a shot at that?
The assessment committee actually is not looking at summative tests, where there's a distinction here, so no, I don't think. They certainly could address that in terms of our interim and other testing that we're doing in the district, but not in terms of the Smarter Balanced or OAKS.
So the assessment committee did not look at the SBAC?
No, the assessment committee is still meeting, and we're not looking specifically at the Smarter Balanced.
So how do we get an assessment of what this is costing us, and then how? So who's helping us pay for this, and how is it that we're helping our state legislators or the feds or whoever it is, understand the burden it's putting on us?
And we've had a number of requests for costing this out, and it's actually difficult to do.
I'm sure.
In part because we have been doing some standardized summative assessments already, and so some of that, and plus the components that we would be doing anyway, like technology upgrades and so forth, that aren't being done just for testing, but would be happening anyway. It's difficult to separate that out. The technology piece, I would defer to Josh Klein, our CIO, to answer that question. The cost of the test itself is borne by the taxpayers. It's funded by the Department of Education. And it is about 80% or so more expensive than the OAKS assessment.
Did you say 80%?
On a per student basis. Yeah.
Wow.
So I think that's a good question for legislators.
Well, yeah, and I know that we're going to the legislature next week, and so it's a good talking point for us.
And where we're seeing additional costs are, as you mentioned earlier, around professional development. So we are having some increased time demands around training teachers and test administrators to make sure that testing is delivered appropriately. Okay. And right now those are being just absorbed by the budget that I have in my department.
Okay. And then I had a second question, which is, during the testing period itself. What kinds of additional supports are we providing to teachers or students who are experiencing anxiety? You know, what kind of specific supports are we going to be able to offer out in the schools?
Beyond what has been offered during Oaks in prior years, there hasn't been much discussion around additional supports on top of what's been offered in the past.
So I guess what I'm hearing from teachers and some community members is that this seems to be a very different testing cycle than in the past in terms of the hours and the anxiety around it. So I guess I would ask us to talk with teachers maybe, talk with teachers, to just figure out what other support we can be providing. Because it does feel different
Yeah, I mean,
than
maybe
when
if I
we
could
did
just
the
chime
OAKS
in.
test in the past.
I mean, I feel this gets back to the spirit of our resolution, which I really appreciate Gwen Sullivan citing at length. I mean, it really is, to me, most important that all the adults in our schools are there should not be anxiety about this. They should not be presenting this as
I agree.
something that is the be all and end all or defining the worth of a student or the school. So it's up to us as adults not to convey that and that level of anxiety to the students, while at the same time saying, this is a harder test. But I don't, this is something that we need to make sure that students understand that we're not about, their education is not about the taking of this test, and it should never, the classroom time shouldn't be either. But I see Mina had her hand up for a while.
Yeah, I was just wondering how students are getting their scores or results back.
Oh, thank you. I did have a bullet point to mention that. We will continue our practice, which is actually a state requirement, to send test scores home at least once a year to parents. We normally have done that mailing over the course of the summer, and we'll continue to do that, but obviously it won't be able to happen until we have all of those results back. So it'll probably be a little later this year than normal, but that's how we will get those home.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure, Dr. Gill.
They used to have at some point they had you passed or failed on the end of the test. That's off of ours. We don't have that any longer.
Yeah, the Oaks test could show the students their score and their achievement level, meeting, not meeting, nearly meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That could have been turned on or off. Most schools, I think, have that feature turned on. Smarter Balance does not have anything like that, because, as mentioned earlier, there are human scoring components to this right now that prohibit that from happening.
So they're sending home to the parents in the mail or an email or what?
It'll be in the mail.
In the mail, whether or not your child passed.
Yeah.
It exceeded.
Yeah. Right now, I think Oregon has some decisions. States have some flexibility on the terminology that's used for student performance. And I think you've probably seen a lot of that dialogue and debate happening at the national level in terms of reporting scale scores versus performance levels. Right now, Smarter Balance is just describing them as level 1, 2, 3, and 4. They haven't come up with any more labels than that at this point.
So then will it label it out on the 1, 2, 3, 4, do we know? I mean, do we have any idea what that looks like? I mean, do we send it and say, well, your kid's a 1, so he's not going to college, probably gonna be a criminal? I mean, that's the kind of talk you get out there.
Well, I don't think it would say that exactly, but yes, right now.
Well, you didn't, and they didn't, but you go out in the world and you're seeing that kind of stuff.
You're setting it.
Unless Oregon comes up with other labels for those levels, level 1, 2, 3, and 4 is what I would anticipate.
So,
Okay.
how about Dr. Curlett or Knowles, any comments or questions?
I had one question, Joe. It's going to take, what'd you say, like 3 to 6 months to get the results back this first
3 to
time
6
around?
weeks.
Weeks, and then is that time period going to narrow as the test becomes more?
That's a good question. There is conversation about using artificial intelligence for scoring. ODE experimented with that with the Oaks writing assessment a number of years ago and decided that the technology was not up to snuff to do that at that point. Technology's improved since then, but
right.
But I don't know.
Okay.
So that's possible.
Before you head out, I just want to say kudos to you and your department, because I know this has been a hugely moving target and it continues to move. And the fact, I appreciate the process updates about where we are, and the fact that we are as ready as we are technology-wise is a big kudos to the departments working together. I also want to note again that if there are things that we can be doing to make your life easier, I know cut scores and how they're calculated, and the state's taken away our ability to replicate results, so we don't even know what's going into the formula. If there are things that we can be doing, elevating to our legislators from your standpoint, please let us know, because like Director Buell, I have the utmost respect for our research and evaluation department, and I'd like to try to find ways to support you. And then I guess I just want to ask the board, or Mr. Suggs, if you know, or if folks, my colleagues know, my understanding is that there's an Oregon administrative rule, 705-010-0025, that indicates that the OIB actually has a legal obligation to provide us with an explanation of outcomes to be measured and the methodology for calculating them. And what I think I hear you reporting is saying we're not going to know what those are for another 6 months after that.
Obviously, I can't speak for the OAIB. My guess is
Please
they would
don't.
say that they would say that their methodology is that we are presenting to them the achievement, the percent of our students that are proficient or not proficient on the assessment. That's their methodology.
Yeah.
Not their responsibility is not to define how the scores are calculated on the Smarter Balance side. If I understood what you read correctly.
So,
do one more.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that they've met their obligation.
But,
I
yeah,
appreciate
and
it.
we'll continue this discussion in the next item, but Bobby, do you have?
I just wanted to do a quick shout out to Nancy Golden, who is the Oregon Chief Education Officer. And in this case, she basically came out last week with a statement saying that she believes Oregon schools deserve a 1-year reprieve from being rated according to their test scores. So that's a step in the right direction.
Which is actually what we called for last summer.
Yeah, so I actually want to at least acknowledge that.
Yeah. So, great, let's move on
I've
to
got
the
a couple
next
more questions if
topic. Well, I think these
you don't
folks will be around, because I do want to make
wanna ask
sure,
you now, if I can.
real quick, then
That'd
we
be
can
quick
move on to
ones.
the bigger topic.
It's only a couple. And one's a comment. How are we doing? Are we just handling, if you check the religious box, that's it, you're good to go on opting out?
Correct. We are not evaluating the reason that's put down.
And it says in this, it says administrator or principal, this is on one of the things that I received. Administrator, principal, or vice assistant principal talks with parents about requirements of state testing, how results are used, and the impact of having students not participate. That's kind of the same problem that I had on the other things. The impact of not participating, one of the impacts of not participating, I'll bet we're not sharing, is that if enough people don't participate, they'll shut these tests down and we won't have to put up with them. I doubt if we're sharing that, but you know, that would be a good thing that we maybe want to equalize out. And the other thing on that, and then I only have one more question, one more comment. A school administrator must approve, initial, or sign and date the bottom of the form. That's to get it sent in, right? Not to get. They don't have to approve the form. They don't have to initial the form for it to be a good form. You can just send in your form as a parent, and then whatever your form is, you check religion. That's it. You're opted out of that, and then he or she initials the form when it gets sent upstairs. Is that right? It wasn't clear in the writing.
So the intent of putting that's not a state requirement. The intent of putting that on there is because we wanted to be sure that parents knew what they were doing when they chose to opt out. There are parents who are checking boxes because they're encouraged to check boxes. That's evident by some of these forms that we're getting where they're exempting their students from tests that aren't even being given to their students. So we just are wanting, the intent of that was to be sure that principals could talk with the parents about understanding what the testing is, what the impacts are, and so forth.
Yeah, I have real serious concerns about somebody turning in an opt-out form and then having to be talked out of it by the principal, which is basically what you're kind of suggesting is the thing that they're doing. The principal should be accepting that and saying thank you, initial it, and send it on. That should be it. If we're going to respect parents, I mean, I've had stories about people trying to talk them out of opting their children out, when in actuality, they shouldn't have to, it shouldn't be a fight with the principal to opt your child out. It should be a parent decision where they go forward and they opt their child out. Principal says, thank you, that's nice. And I think we should have a written form that we hand to that the principal then hands to the parent. So we're not relying on the principal, whose school's going to look bad if they have too many, to really try and get these people to not opt out, so they don't go over the numbers. But if we had a written form, say, here, the district asks us to give you this form, bingo, are there any questions I can answer? No problem. But having the principal try and telling people you shouldn't be opting out or da-da-da, that's not where this should be going, I don't think. And here's my last question. I was a teacher in Washington for 10 years, and I taught in the language arts class, and my 7th grade language arts was the top rated test results for the state of Washington in our socioeconomic deal. Our 7th grade, I was taught in it. And one of the things we did in order to get that rating was we paid a person $1,000 a day to come and teach the test. And I was doing what I was told to do, and we gave maybe 10 practice tests. And I tried really to bring it down as best I kind of could, you know. But you had made this comment, and I just wanted to point out that it's, you know, and I'm not saying that, but the comment that some teachers aren't getting through. With this test, we've got teachers who, of course, you're doing the practice tests. And not only are you doing the practice tests, how you really do the best on these tests is to teach the kids how to take the test. That's what we did. And I sat there and harangued kids by saying, you know, they asked for 2 things. You have to give them 2. You've only given them 1. That's the way we kind of have a tendency to work out there when the pressure is all about these tests. We can't really sit. It'd be nice if we could sit back and say to the teachers, okay, we don't want you, we want you to tell your principal, forget these tests, they're no big deal. We've been told by the school board they're no big deal, so we're not going to worry about them. We're just going to kind of go through, and we're going to teach this way on it. I know that's not happening, and that's not happening at all in our schools. And so for us to say, okay, we're not really putting on the pressure, we're putting on the pressure. We're putting on the pressure. And we need to balance that, in my opinion. And that's not direct to you, because you're not in charge of that, but we need to balance it. There you go.
What you're talking about is the same, actually, I have the same comment, and really in form of a question, which would be to the superintendent, because I am hearing, so actually Mary Anderson came and did a really great presentation with Q&A at Wilson High School, and I hope there can be more of those sessions. It was really helpful, I thought. And and having the vice principal there who was actually working, and really it sounded like her biggest challenge was getting the time blocks, because this is a lengthy test, and that is one of our concerns as well, I know, although at least unlike the Oaks, it won't be taken over and over and over again throughout the year, so that's a plus. But in terms of figuring out the scheduling, sounded like the biggest challenge, but she confirmed that they would be spending no more than 1 period on trying to do a practice test. So whereas I'm hearing teachers saying that they're going to be doing weeks of test preparation, which is absolutely not the intention of what. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, given that that is what we have stated as a board, and I know that's the shared value that we have at the central office, I'm hoping that the superintendent can do whatever is in her power to make sure that it's clear to all the principals and teachers that we are not wanting weeks and weeks to be spent on test preparation. So I don't know, as a district testing coordinator, if you can comment to that at all?
Absolutely. In fact, I've responded to multiple emails today where that exact topic has come up, and I have continued to reiterate in writing. As in my role, I'm not interested in having kids use this day after day. This is not designed as a diagnostic tool to infer how the kids might do on the actual test. It should not replace any content instruction. The purpose of experiencing the practice test should be just to orient to the testing interface and understand how to manipulate the different types of items. There shouldn't be that much time spent on it.
Yeah.
And I absolutely see no content instructional value in spending that much time on a practice test. But absolutely, and like you said, I've been fielding those kinds of questions that come across my desk daily.
So maybe there, as we continue to fine-tune the communications, that could be repeated both for teachers and principals and parents and students, that this, I think that you said it really well at Wilson, and so did Aisha Freeman, the vice principal, that we're about teaching and learning. We're not about this test itself is not, it's just a measure, and we don't want students to be obsessing or teachers to be obsessing about it or being stressed out about it. So let's move on to the next topic, though, because I get this, as Superintendent Smith said, that gets at the larger question, and we're really excited that we have a work group that has been working on this larger issue. So Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce it? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe and Mary, and I will just say that we will review the Director Buell. We will review the communications as you suggested.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, as I just described earlier, we have convened a PPS Assessment Advisory Committee, and to present an update from that committee, we have Ewan Brawley, who's the Senior Director of Instruction, Curriculum, and Assessment, Gwen Sullivan, President of the Portland Association of Teachers, and Rick Stiggins, founder of the Assessment Training Institute, who will give us an update. And I'm going to say this has been like a topic of conversation and concern, and the board put together a resolution last July, as was described. Again, this was a topic when we were not setting targets on selected items on our achievement compact, and made really clear proposals to the state, which actually subsequently went to an assessment committee that the state convened, and some of the things that were embodied in the recommendation that the board, or the resolution the board put forward, actually came back as embedded in the resolution from the state's assessment committee, which we were pleased to see, because I think similar kind of wrestling that the state is doing about what role Smarter Balance plays in our overall assessment framework. This group really took on what should our district assessment framework be, what are we using assessments for, are we getting the value from them given the time spent. We've also participated in a similar dialogue with the Council of Great City School Districts, the largest urban districts in the country, who was doing a similar review across all of our districts. So I'm very eager to hear the update from this committee, and just appreciate the folks who are here in the audience to be part of this tonight. So Ewan, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Superintendent Smith, members of the board. Very pleased to be here tonight with Gwen Sullivan from the Portland Association of Teachers and Dr. Rick Stiggins alongside me, who has served in a very critical advisory capacity for this assessment advisory committee that I'm going to update you on tonight. And as Superintendent Smith already stated, for the purposes of this discussion and this update, I want to define assessment really, really clearly and sort of draw a stark contrast to the Smarter Balance update that you heard before. Define assessment as the process of gathering evidence of student learning to inform instructional decisions. So a much wider construct in terms of what we're talking about as we talk about assessment as it pertains to this group. And the goal here is really to identify a unifying vision on the role and purpose of assessment for us as a district. Teachers, staff, students, and really come together and have an honest discussion about assessment and assessment literacy and its potential as it relates to instruction. And you'll see some of the artifacts that I have up on the screen right now are sort of provide a critical backdrop to our work as a committee. The Successful Schools Framework in the center, you'll see that quality instruction and quality assessment are intertwined and inextricably linked. And so again, as we talk about assessment in this context, it's really about how it informs instruction in the classroom is a big part of the work that this committee is taking on. The other piece, since the cultural transformation document is up there, and I believe you all have a copy of Rick's book, Revolutionize Assessment. Cultural transformation, revolution, and this does pertain to the discussion we've had already tonight in terms of what needs to take place around assessment. And I'll let Rick comment on this, but really solid assessment practices that empower students, that help students take control of their own learning, that promote a sense of self-efficacy among students as learners, that inform teaching, as well as do the pieces that we need to do as a district in terms of informing the system as a whole. So with that, I'll invite, just as introductory remarks, any from Gwen and Rick. And I do want to say that Rick does have a prior commitment this evening, so he may have to leave the presentation a little bit early.
I just want to say part of this assessment committee being asked to be part of it, you know, of course we were a little skeptical, sorry to say, but as we got into it, the educators that were in the room were really about looking at all the different kinds of assessments that we're doing, not just the Smarter Balanced assessment or OAKS. We're looking at the broad picture and really what are our thoughts around it? What is the reason for it in the first place? You know, we often say as teachers, we invented tests. It's part of the teaching and learning process. And so to really look at assessments and to have them be an integral part of the learning process rather than something that is outside is ultimately the goal. And so it's about taking back our public education in a way that's really meaningful to our kids. And so we're not there yet. We have a ways to go, but we see some things moving in that assessment committee.
Hi.
Hi.
It's nice to meet you. I'm the retired founder of the Assessment Training Institute. And am serving as a volunteer advisor for the state. The state commission is building the new vision for the future of assessment in Oregon schools as we speak, and under Nancy Golden's leadership. So I'm advising there too, as a volunteer citizen. And so it is here. I'm here as a volunteer to try to offer some counsel on sound assessment practices. And I do have a commitment. I have daycare for my sick wife until 8 o'clock. I will be home by 8 o'clock tonight. I apologize, I'll have to speak quickly and leave. I want you to know that the advice that I give is built around 3 basic principles. One is the idea of balanced assessment systems. Assessment, as Ewan said, is the process of gathering evidence to inform instructional decisions. The array of people who make decisions that impact kids is a long list, and their purposes are diverse. A balanced assessment system serves all of those users, not just the ones concerned about the once-a-year test. And it's imperative, the second thing is, that all of those assessments be of high quality. That's imperative in terms of what you're thinking about and what the committee's thinking about. Because you need to understand that the vast majority of teachers graduated from teacher preparation programs devoid of any relevant, helpful assessment training. So the vast majority face their assessment challenges without having been given the opportunity to do it well. So a foundation of assessment literacy is critical, unless we believe that they can turn to their principals for help in this regard. Let's be clear about the fact that assessment training remains non-existent in leadership preparation programs across the country. We are a nation of policymakers, school leaders, and practitioners facing issues like the one addressed here tonight, without having been given the opportunity to understand the basic principles of sound practice that are needed to make these policy and instructional decisions. So my world has been built for the last 30 years around putting in place a foundation of assessment literacy. That's what the Assessment Training Institute does. And then the third thing is that my world, if you've had a chance to see Revolutionize yet, and if you haven't, I want you to take a look at it. It won't take more than a couple of hours. Is that I think we need to pay a whole lot more attention to understanding the assessment experience from the student's point of view. That is, seeing it through student eyes. It turns out that the emotional dynamics of the assessment experience from the student's point of view is critical, because they are going to interpret their results and they're going to decide what they're going to do on the basis of those results. That means they are data-based instructional decision makers too. And if we continue to ignore that, we'll continue to to do harm in places where it need not be done. So my advice to my colleagues here is balance. Lots of people need good assessments at the classroom level, on an interim benchmark basis, and annually. They all have to be of high quality, and they all have to pay attention to the relationship between the assessment experience and students and their academic well-being. And the key thing is we know how to do all of that stuff really well. I'm offering advice to Senator Alexander in D.C. as they reauthorize ESEA about what it means, what it would mean to do it right. The new vision that has come from the commission so far in Oregon describes how to do it right, according to accepted standards of good practice in assessment. Yeah? And my advice to these guys, we've only had, what, 2 meetings, so this committee is just very new. We'll be the same. And I'd be more than willing to take a few minutes to answer any questions you have about any of that, or any reactions that you have to it. We've come to a watershed time here in Portland and in Oregon, and I'm heading off to Michigan in the flight early in the morning to do a presentation at a big conference there. Everybody is at the same place. We're confronting assessment as a part of the American educational enterprise from a new and hopefully enlightened and progress-oriented point of view. And I'm in. I am in. Incidentally, our daughter graduated from Wilson, and so whatever. We are good citizens.
Thank you so much for being here. So, comments or questions before Mr. Siggins?
Do we have a student who would like to make
you know what,
really quickly? If that's okay.
Actually not right at this moment, no. But you can go and check in with our board manager over here. You need to finish up with this panel. Thank you.
We were just talking about wanting to hear from students, and this took a lot of guts for her to come up here, so she could just like make.
We have time set aside at the beginning of every meeting for students. So why don't we, if you could go over and talk to our board manager right now, we'll see if we can do that. But right now, this gentleman who's come to us has to leave. He needs to get home. So we need to finish up the presentation. But please go check in with Roseanne.
I have a question.
Okay, so as Rick was saying, you know, our assessment system needs to serve a variety of users, and paramount in all of our discussions and our work as a committee is students as users of that information, as well as teachers. I want to share the goals sort of our compact that we have described as a group. As I said, we want a clear and unifying vision for district and classroom assessment within PPS.
And I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I think since Mr. Siggins has to leave, maybe we should just pause if there's questions directly for him.
Mr. Stiggins.
We really appreciate you being here and
Sure
your
thing.
service. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but just knowing that he's got a time pressure. Director Buell.
Could you explain what you mean by balance?
Yeah, here's how you can think of it. Actually, you have a chart somewhere, I thought, but I'm not sure. That is the vision of balance that I share virtually universally. There are assessments that happen day to day in the classroom, and there are people who use them to inform instructional decisions. There are assessments that happen periodically throughout the school year, and they inform a different array of more programmatic decisions. And then there are assessments that happen once a year, which historically in our parlance have been our accountability assessments. So we have 3 different levels of use of assessment, each one of which has different users and different uses, answering different questions, all of which can contribute. In addition, we can use the assessment process both to support learning, that's called formative applications, and to judge the sufficiency of learning. Those are called summative applications. And the little chart that I use, I cross those 3 rows with 2 columns. And each cell describes the users and uses that are important in the promotion of effective schools. And my point is that each cell makes a unique contribution to the development of effective schools that the other cells can't make. We build a balanced assessment system when we make sure that the assessments used throughout that system serve the information needs of important users. And those users include the people that you can anticipate students.
Does that balance include time instructional time versus assessment time?
It certainly can.
I mean, because a lot of the, and does it include the idea of that some things should not be assessed, that you shouldn't be messing with them at all, just leave them and teach them and go on, and include that the distance, the idea that some things you don't really want to assess because you're just teaching within a spectrum versus teaching for specific goals? I mean, is that included in your assessment stuff?
You're spilling into the instructional side. Think of me as Rick, the assessment guy. If you can define it, I can show you how to assess it. How we teach it or how we relate to those learning targets from an instructional point of view is beyond my supply lines. I'm not an instructional specialist. Okay. I'm an assessment specialist.
That's fair. I know you've been around teaching for a long time now.
I have. That having been said, a major tenet of our teachings in our Assessment Training Institute around the principle we call assessment for learning, in which assessment and instruction are intertwined inexorably, so that student involvement in the assessment process helps them watch themselves ascending the scaffolding to higher levels of competence, and that turns out to be an immense motivator and confidence builder and trigger of immense achievement gains. So I do see the link between the two, but I have to be very careful when I start talking about the relationship between the learning targets and the instructional interventions in people. I'm not that guy. What other things?
Yeah, quick question, Director
So
Reynolds.
we've been talking about Smarter Balance most of this meeting.
Yes.
So my question for you is, I'm sure you've looked at Smarter Balance and have some thoughts about it. I'd love to hear what you think as far as it's as a summative assessment for students. And
I am not a student of Smarter Balance. I have not spent much time looking at it. My world revolves around the other 99.9% of the assessments that happen in a kid's life, those that happen day to day in the classroom and on an interim basis. So I have watched from afar over the last 5 or 6 years as this has unfolded. And all I can say to you is that in the context of the statewide vision, my suggestion has been that there be a rigorous program of evaluative research conducted around this particular assessment before its consequences begin to fall on people. A rigorous program, and have suggested research questions that should be asked.
So,
thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and I know you need to end that. So I just wanted to confirm, because your input would be so valuable, that you are advising the state as well as our assessment work group, so they are hearing that from you. Okay, that's great.
And have been on that one for several months.
Great.
But this one new, and I think the people involved in this committee in the district are really strong and really dedicated and really articulate. And I think there's great promise for a vision that will be of high quality too. And I plan to stay involved as long as they want me.
Well, we so much appreciate your volunteer service.
Greg? I just wanted to ask real quickly, something that I appreciate about this work group that we'll talk about more after you leave, is how much I appreciate working with teachers to figure out the right assessments. And something that I've long been frustrated is that teachers haven't stepped forward to say, here is the framework for assessment, here are the formative assessments that we believe are necessary, and not just in language arts and math and science, but across disciplines. Can you talk a little bit about how you're supporting our professional associations with that?
Yeah, first of all, the foundation of the state initiative is OEIB and OEA, Oregon Education Association. And a representative from PAT has been on that state commission also, Lisa, and has been a valuable member of that committee. In my 30 or 40 year career in measurement, I have never seen a vision of excellence, an initiative like this, come so directly from the ranks of teachers. That's unprecedented in my experience. Now that vision, coming from the classroom and from teachers and from school leaders too, now is going out for comment statewide. And so all the interested players will be commenting on that vision. And the thing that I like about this committee is that, once again, the preponderance of people on the committee are teachers. But there are school leaders involved also. And so I think the thing that makes me most optimistic is that this is really coming from a grassroots effort. It isn't some group of people in DC saying here's what you will do. It's the other way around. Here's what we will do, and it's a good vision. It's a good vision.
Dr. Stiggins, thank you so much. We really appreciate that, and we know you need to go.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Rick. It's okay.
So you and my apologies for interrupting you before, but we just wanted to get, well, we had him, Dr. Stiggins here. So now please proceed.
Not at all. We utilize him in much the same way during our committee meetings. So real quick, and I won't read these to you verbatim. Obviously, a goal is a unifying vision for assessment and assessment for learning, as Rick described it, for the district. From that, the goal of this committee will be to make recommendations for components of a professional development plan that is inclusive of specific work around assessment, but also, as you can imagine, if you haven't already read Revolutionized Assessment or read the state report, how assessment literacy and understanding of how assessment informs instruction informs all of our professional development. So this group will be supporting that need too. The third item, and another significant charge of this group, and we have some data to share with you about this tonight, is to collect and analyze an audit of the required assessments throughout the district. And this is where there is a little bit of cross with the Smarter Balance work, since Smarter Balance is an assessment that impacts students. The goal of this audit was to make visible some data around the amount of time that students spend on either district required and or state required assessments. So we have some data to share with you tonight, and that the committee is in the process of unpacking and making sense of now. But specifically, it's really trying to figure out, are there points in the year when we are over-testing students, again, with using district and state required assessments? Are there specific assessments tools that we use that are redundant, that we could be gathering the information somewhere else, or we are already gathering the information somewhere else? And so the group is going to be doing some work around that data. As you heard before, a big charge of our group is to make recommendations, specific recommendations that will impact our assessment framework. What are the required assessment tools to, again, speak to Rick's point about understanding the data that we need to generate for all users across the system, and what are the tools that are needed to be able to provide that data to answer those questions. What happens is not, atypical, is that assessment tools develop and are added over a period of time. What we really want to do here is understand all of the tools across the system and align them to the vision that we're talking about, so that there is real clarity around why we're using everything that we're using, what its intended purpose is, what it's not intended to do, almost as important. And then finally, make recommendations as appropriate on how we measure our success for both the milestones and the achievement compacts. With that, a couple of visuals to share for you that kind of reinforce Rick's point and this idea that assessment that takes place in the classroom is really, if you think about the dog, that's the dog. The other piece is the tail. And so what really makes the most impact on kids are the teacher moves that are connected with instruction, that information gathering process, the process that students use all the time. Students are constantly making judgments about their own progress based on what's communicated by teachers. We want to be able to impact that in a really positive way. And really, we're trying to answer the question again, what's the professional development we need to support assessment for learning and student self-efficacy in classrooms? And what are the tools and information that we also need, as you see going around the outside of this visual, to inform the system, to inform progress towards the milestones, to inform some of the key work that we do, that we need to do around the superintendent's priorities. This is just another visual. Again, this kind of looks at the impact of assessment and in terms of the information that it provides around in-depth knowledge of students. Rick likes to say that the depth of knowledge starts with the classroom teacher and fans out from there. And so in terms of when we're talking about specific information relevant to specific students, the most important data collection that we do and gathering is around what happens in the classroom. And the scope of the work of this particular advisory committee is really around the right-hand side of this chart, the district and classroom level assessments that we use across the system. This chart here is directly from Rick's work. It's different than the table that he referenced that's in your packets. This one has to do with, as we look at our assessment tools at the district level, we have to consider what is it that we are trying to assess. And so the method of assessment needs to match the target. Rick is constantly talking about the fact that no one method of assessment is superior inherently to any others. So for example, the methods that you see here are selected response, otherwise known as multiple choice, written response, performance kinds of assessments, personal communications. Gwen's going to talk about a visit that we made to New York here in a second. No one method is superior to the others. It depends on the type of information that we're trying to gather from students. And a balanced system takes into account all of the different kinds of targets that need to be assessed. So as the committee is doing its work around putting its arms around what are the assessments that we need to have to support the system, as well as to inform teaching and learning in the classroom, this is a big part of that work. What are the targets that we're actually assessing? What information are we trying to gather from students? All right.
Okay, so I'll pick up on the New York Consortium and our visit. Essentially what happened is through our negotiations last year, unbeknownst to us, the teachers and educators in New York were watching what was going on. And one thing that was clear to them is that we were saying things like we don't want to teach to a test, that we believe in academic freedom. And because of that, we were invited to come to their conference, which is the New York Consortium Schools. There were 28 public schools in New York City. And I think when we got there, they just had added 10 more to the consortium of schools. And these are public New York City schools. The consortium, and I know that we'll go over some of it, has been around for about 20 years. And they are doing performance assessments in lieu of high-stakes standardized assessments. They are doing amazing things in the schools that we got to visit. It started off that we went into their conference where it was very educator-driven. Their professional development was all put on by the teachers doing the work. And we split up and went into different sessions. And when I say we, there were 3 teachers, and then Ewan from the district went, and we got to see what they were doing. Each of us split up into these different sessions. We learned a lot. I mean, the one I went to is on critical thinking and the different ways that you can look at critical thinking. Same lesson, but using kinesthetic, using questioning, all different ways, and it was hands-on practical things. It was awesome. And each one of us went to our own, and we discussed it afterwards. But I think the bigger part of going, it actually is the first time in a long time that I actually think there's hope for something else. And what we were seeing them do, they demonstrated with their students, is a better way of doing assessments. Myself, I got to visit it was a 6th through 12th grade school, and it was called the School of the Future. And these kids were actually, it's like they have their thesis, they have to, it's like they have to provide all of the documentation for what their arguments are, whether it is history, literature, math, and science. In each one of those areas, they actually write a 20-page paper, and they say what they're trying to prove. They have to include all of the resources, what tools they're using, incorporate a lot of information, and they really have to defend, their dissertation, so to speak. And then afterwards, it's pretty amazing because it is 2 students and 2 adults that do all the evaluating. And the students have as much weight as the adults. And they, so the learning isn't just from the one student that's giving their presentation, it's from the other students that are actually questioning, why didn't you do this? And why did you say this? And where did you get your information? So there's a lot of, so many things to talk about, but the school that we went to and the different assessments that we saw that the kids were demonstrating, every single student was a student of color that was showing their work. They were doing amazing, really amazing things in the school, and it made me feel like this is a much better, much more rigorous, problem-solving, cooperative, working together way to assess kids and their knowledge. So it was inspiring.
Great.
So I would add that 3 of the 4 folks that went on this excursion to New York to visit these schools are part of our assessment committee. And I would echo what Gwen says in terms of the level of rigor that was expected of kids. But what I would add, I guess, is, or say it maybe in a slightly different way, it was impossible to distinguish between assessment that was going on an ongoing basis, even this relatively high stakes performance type assessment task that kids were engaged with, from the instruction itself. And it was impossible almost both from a student perspective and from a teacher perspective. And so going back to Rick's chart around the type of how you assess students needs to match the type of target that you're assessing. In this case, what I saw was very highly cognitive demanding kinds of tasks that were really aligned with higher level thinking and habits of mind that are articulated in the Common Core standards. These assessments have been going on way before New York adopted the Common Core standards, but all of the big shifts that are part of that movement were present in what kids were engaged with in classrooms, which was really, really powerful to see. I got to see a high school, the 9th through 12th graders, all EBs, all ESL students, and the sense of community, and again, the sense of ownership and pride in what they were doing to demonstrate proficiency was really remarkable. And so it was a really powerful experience. And it's worth noting that these schools, in terms of their demographics, are very, very similar to schools throughout New York public school system, and the outcomes that they show in terms of their graduation rates specifically exceed those of different schools in New York public schools. So it's definitely, in revolutionized assessment, Rick talks about the need to capitalize on promising practices that are going on with assessment that maybe have been underemphasized with the high stakes testing movement. This would be, in my mind, one of those promising kinds of practices that's really linked to instruction and supporting kids in a really positive way. So, in light of that, as we evaluate our district level assessment tools specifically, what are Rick mentioned, used the term benchmark and interim assessments that we have in place to support teaching and learning. I always feel like that balanced kind of system is analogous to a fence. And so a fence has two principal components, posts and rails. And you know, if you think about the posts, they're generally less than 10% of the overall makeup of the fence, but they play an important function. In my mind, the posts themselves make up the assessment of learning. Rick uses the term verifying, checking for student learning. Those are the posts within the system. The rails are more than 90% of the fence, and that's what goes on in the classroom every day. So I use this analogy because as an advisory, when we look at the system, the most important system is obviously what's going on in the classroom, but a balanced system has both the posts and the rails. So that's a discussion that we're having as a group. So I mentioned the inventory already. So really the purpose of doing this was to get some hard data and take stock of what we have. The results of the inventory you have as part of your board packet. And as we look at them, we're really thinking about three essential questions. Again, these come from Rick's work. What decisions are to be made using the assessment results? Who are the decision makers, and what information is needed to make those decisions? Additionally, as we look at all of our assessment tools, understanding that any assessment at the district level is over-assessment if the results aren't used to inform the system and/or instruction. So with that, you have some handouts in your packet that I'll comment on briefly that really try to bring to light from a student level perspective the amount of time that individual students spend on district required and, for the purposes of this discussion, state required assessments. This one talks, really it's just a comprehensive inventory of those assessments along the left-hand side and when during the course of the year they're administered, and estimates of how much time, again, it takes to administer them for an individual student, not for an entire class, but for an individual student. And then attached to those are individual student profiles. So with research and evaluation support, we really wanted to gather data, again, what does this look like from a student perspective, and where are hot points within the career of a student, K through 12 in our system, where we may be asking way too much in terms of district and state required assessments. So you have a range of those to look at in your packet, and I'm happy to answer questions about those as we proceed. This first one is a third grade student who happens to be a TAG student, so you'll see TAG screeners on there. The student also happens to be ESL, and you see a considerable amount of district and state required assessments, particularly at the beginning of the year, at the winter sort of benchmark period, and then at the end of the year. And then here's another student. This student, you know, is a gen ed student, second grade, and there are fewer, considerably fewer in this case. And you have a number of samples, again, student profiles, and what the committee is really trying to do is put our arms around all of the assessments we use, inform the conversation around what data do we need to generate as a system, and identify points in the system where we may be putting too much of a burden on students, but also teachers. So what this data shows is what it takes to administer a test to one student, but also relevant to the conversation is what it takes to administer an assessment, if we're requiring that of teachers, to their entire class. So that's a part of the conversation as well. Here we have some data from the Council of Great City Schools that the committee hasn't seen yet, but will definitely be looking at. In the late summer, early fall, the council, as you may know, did a survey, completed a survey in which they asked all of the folks that are in Joe's position to make estimates of the number and types of assessments that we use as a system. And they have shared some data with us that basically shows in this slide the total number of assessments per grade level. So we have that to match up against the data that we have from our own audit. The methodology in terms of how they got this data is different from how we did, but it's also really relevant to the conversation. And then you already have in your packet a copy of the Oregon Vision. This is a recent development. So Rick has been part of this committee as well in an advisory role. The document that you have was, as I shared it with the committee, really something that we envisioned as being the type of artifact that we would produce as a group in terms of a vision, guiding principles, a student bill of rights. And so what we're in the process of doing now, since this just came to us last week, is really looking at it, and we have sort of an online forum as a committee to be able to respond to it, and determining what our response as the PPS assessment advisory is going to be during this public comment period to this Oregon Vision. I imagine that the Oregon Vision is going to be very much aligned with the work of our committee based on the discussions that we've had so far in the first 3 meetings, but we will respond as appropriate as a committee to the state level experience. Oh no.
Oh boy.
Okay. Averted disaster there. Gwen, did you have any other comments about that?
Yeah, I think that some of it's important to know is that we started on the work of looking at what are all of the assessments, and we haven't finished that. There were arguments about how much time something actually took versus what it's saying that it took. And then we also looked at things like it says the Easy CBM, for example, takes 30 minutes, but we know that classes will go down to the computer lab, and if they have one period, they end up taking the whole period because not everybody gets done within that certain amount of time, so that whole period is taken away. Is it all testing? Maybe not, but the whole period is gone. So we talked about some of those sort of nuances, as well as, so we know that we have these assessments. Are these the best assessments to be using in the first place? And part of that's part of the conversation. We haven't addressed all of that yet, but it's just the beginning of really talking about, is this the right assessment? Is there a better one? Is there something that could be that teachers could get together and develop something that makes more sense for their kids? Things like that.
Great.
Let me see. Is this the best assessment? Assessments for learning. Yeah. So these ones aren't it.
All right. So.
Okay, so last slide. Our timeline as we envisioned it really at the beginning and the onset was to identify the committee, share the purpose with our principals and leadership team. By the end of the year, we hope to have a similar kind of artifact as the one that the state produced for our district. And in addition to that, we hope to have sort of a group of recommendations around what our professional development plan should look like as it relates to assessment. Those are really the 2 big pieces of work that we want to collaborate towards to produce for this committee. And it is an evolving process. As I said, we did not know until recently that the state was going to produce their vision. Right. So that impacts the work that we have to do in a positive way. And Lisa Kane, who has been part of the Oregon Vision team, is going to be joining our team as well. So there'll be some cross-pollination there.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is super exciting. I do just note for time check that we're 15 minutes past our time for this item, and we have many more items. So let's maybe make some brief comments or questions. This is super exciting work in progress. So thank you so much. Anybody? Okay. Director Buell?
First, my compliments to the superintendent for putting this committee together. It's pretty good. It's not predominantly teachers, as Rick suggested, but there's a large number of them on there. I have just one question and then a couple comments, and then we'll be done. Is this your list
I think what that is a description of each of the assessments that are identified in the
Right,
interview.
I mean, this is
in
your
the
inventory? This is not your inventory list?
definitions.
No, that's just a definition, so that if you're
Now, you said you
curious
had
about
the
what.
inventory in
That's
here?
it right there. Right there.
This is the inventory? Okay, on the inventory, let me look through real quickly. Okay, there we go. I knew, because I noticed on the description they were missing a couple. What about tests that, and here's my question, what about tests that are given maybe in one school but not in another, that are kind of standardized type tests? What about like the MAP test? A couple years ago at Lane Middle School, they were giving the MAP test, which is the one they opted out in Seattle. That's why I kind of noted. I mean, do we have anything like that going around? Just then a couple schools are doing it?
We do.
So are those going to be included in there?
Those should be included in there. If there are ones that we have forgot, one of the things that the committee is actually doing is giving us feedback. And is there anything missing from this list?
Good.
One example is we have a group of schools that are using a tool called Performance Series. We put that on the inventory.
Okay. And there's three types of time here. There's student time, class time, and teacher time. And they're all different when you start testing. For instance, the ADEPT test takes a half an hour of student time. But if you have 60 students, it takes 30 hours of teacher time. Class time, it takes no time except unless you count if the teacher's gone. So are we dealing with those overall? I didn't see, I mean, I saw the student time graph, but I didn't see a teacher time graph. Are we moving in that direction? Are we going to deal with that? That's my question, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part of the conversation. As we envision a Bill of Rights for students, and as we think about the teacher load, I imagine something like that the load on a teacher in terms of administering required assessments needs to be commensurate with the information that they're getting out of those assessments. So we have to start with sort of a level playing field around why are we giving any and all of our assessments to begin with? What questions are we trying to answer? What is the data that we're trying to generate to respond to those questions? And if there's not a match between the data that we're generating and the questions we're trying to answer, then we have to ask why we're giving the assessment to begin with. So that can be part of the resolution. But I think making visible data around, and we have had some discussions around the length of time that it takes to administer assessments themselves on the part of teachers is an important one.
So the last question I have is, we had a line between the national and state assessments and the class and district assessments, and said, okay, we're dealing with the class and district assessments, but I'm not sure how you can do that and not deal with the state assessments, because the state and federal assessments are taking up this huge amount of time. And so we could look at our own and say, oh, it's not too bad, but by the time you add it all together in one big pile, you have a different ball game than you do just doing one or the other. And it just seems to me that they're intertwined to where you can't separate them, because if you're going to, and also the other thing that I didn't see in it when I was going through was that those the state tests take a huge amount of preparation, maybe. How much preparation time is it for these tests? I would think we would want to look at that too and not just do it in isolation. That's my comment. You don't have to respond, but you're welcome to.
Oh, I guess what I would say, and Gwen, I'll invite her to respond to it, is what I would say in terms of the Smarter Balanced, for example, is that for the purposes of understanding, again, from a student perspective, the load on students for not just district required, but state required assessments is an important piece of data to make visible, because
and the load on teachers, and the load on class time, and the load on computer time. Because if you have 3 months of you're losing. Some principal told me that they thought they're going to lose their computer room for 3 months. If you've got 3 months there, but then you got this test A taking up another 2 weeks, and this test taking up, by the time you add it all up, you don't have any computer lab left, maybe. So, all that stuff, I just don't like to see us only look at one aspect, which is kind of what you inferred, but I don't think you really meant to do that. and not the other? Because it's all gonna add together in the end.
Again, I think that's where there's congruency between the scope of this committee and understanding what the load is.
I was just going to say, I think part of it is to look at all of it all together, and what's the time it takes, and then really what's the time, how much time does it take? And then as a committee, we were looking at other things. Well, you know, what's not on here is I think it was the Easy CBM math, and then it was like, well, this isn't required. And then you have 5 schools that are like, wait a minute, but we're doing it. So, and then there are many phonics assessments. There's all of these assessments that people have been doing, and they continue to do because nobody said stop doing them, or maybe they find those valuable, but not the ones that are required. And so it is really looking at the bigger picture of first of all, what is the district requiring? And the state feds, you know, what are all of those? And then to look at what are all these other things that are at play as well. I remember we had this conversation at one point about these anchor assignments, that everybody had to do this anchor assignment. I know Carol's wincing, but
before my time.
Well, it was one of these things that everybody had to do this writing prompt, and they kept on going and going. And then we asked the chief academic officer at the time, where are these going? Who's looking at these? And it was nobody. And she was like, why are you doing these? Because it had been enough time that it was just, nobody said stop. And so to be able to look at all of the things that we're requiring, and sometimes, you know, principals don't know that they're not supposed to be doing things. Right. So it's those sorts of conversations.
Are they doing across grade level too? Because like the kindergarten assessment, it shows up in kindergarten, but not in first grade.
That's a great question. I think the kindergarten
That's
assessment is the one at the state level, and then there's the real one that kindergarten teachers do and actually get information from. So to be able to put those together, I think is really powerful and important.
Really
so
complicated.
I'm hearing the committee is taking a holistic look at all of this, which is really exciting and
that
encouraging.
Correct?
So
is that correct? Is that correct? Would they respond that we're looking at the whole thing?
That's
like
what I'm hearing them
explained?
say multiple times.
Yeah, the data in the inventory and the audit is inclusive of all of the assessments that we require across the system.
Okay. And cross grade level and time in the teachers, because none of that's in there. You're going in that direction, you're going to look at all that.
So that's what Director Regan, you had your hand up.
I just had one quick question, and I'm really pleased that we have this committee in place, so thank you for all the work. And as I was looking at the committee makeup, it looked to me like it's about half teachers. If you look at classroom teachers plus teachers on special assignment. So I'm happy to see that balance. What I didn't see in the description was any parents or students, but then when I looked at the actual list, there is one student from Grant High School, it appears to be on the committee. So first of all, is the student participating actively? And second of all, why wouldn't we have a couple of parents on the committee?
So the way we would like to engage students and parents, and we have identified one student already that you see on the list that is willing to engage with us on this, is to, again, from a student perspective and a parent perspective, testify to the committee about assessment to inform the work as it relates to the goals here. So what we propose to do is to have parents and students come in and testify to the committee on how assessment impacts them and the role that it plays with them or has played for them in terms of their educational experience, both positive and negative. And we want to make that visible. What we haven't had is somebody sitting at every meeting, or we didn't envision having students and parents sitting at every meeting for the duration of every meeting.
So my question is, why not? Because there's obviously a lot of parent interest in this issue. So why wouldn't we include a parent on the committee, or a couple of parents on the committee?
Well, the parent issue, the parent interest that I've heard about tonight was related to the Smarter Balanced assessment. And when we talk about the goals of this committee as it relates to teaching and learning in the classroom, it's just a slightly different construct. We have reached out to parents, for example, on the District Parent Advisory Committee that's led by Mary Crow, to gauge interest in terms of coming in and again being part of this advisory and participating, testifying, and sharing their experiences, but not as formal sitting members of the committee on an ongoing basis.
Why don't
Feels
we
like a
throw
void to
couple of
me.
them on there?
Yeah, it feels like a void to me. So I would ask us to consider it, so.
Other, Director Bile?
Gwen, when Rick was here, I mentioned how frustrating it's been for me for a long time that professional associations, especially teacher associations, haven't stepped into the fray and said, here is how this should work. And this isn't a criticism of PAT, it's really both at a state level and especially a national level. And without that voice, I have long felt that policymakers, whether it's in DC or our state, have filled a void. They said, we're going to move on. So can you talk a little bit about how you're engaged and how we can support that voice? Because it's the voice, as you said, assessment happens every day. And there's, as I'm sitting here listening and saying, we're categorizing. There's no way you can check for every thumbs up, thumbs down, or every check of paper as I walk by. But I appreciated you guys put a container around it, right, about district required, that we may not get to every teacher in every classroom. But can you talk a little bit about what either PAT or what the state level or the national level is doing to bring us? You said it was the first time you had hope in a long time, and that gives me a great encouragement.
I appreciate that question as well. I think that part of this, it's the setup in general to engage teachers. Teachers are teaching, and so when there are policy, the legislature, it's at a time when people can't start having those conversations. But on the professional level, we have a number of groups. We have our own PAT. We have instructional and professional development committee that we've had for years, that we've been working on instructional issues and what does better professional development look like. We've actually bring that to the district. Over the years, we've brought PD plans forward that what we thought would be better way to engage teachers. I know that we have our own assessment committee. It's a subcommittee of the Instruction and Professional Development Committee. A lot of it is based around Smarter Balanced, and really it's the one thing we're gonna, we fight against that, but what are we fighting for? And so that's the question in the consortium schools. The hope is that we start to see, like with our partners of Rethinking Schools, a better way of assessing kids that is not just disjointed from the teaching and learning process. Part of it is that connecting with other teacher unions across the country. That's one part of it. I know that at the national level, NEA has a big push of to end the toxic testing, but to have more authentic assessments. But even beyond that, our teachers' unions have come up with, like we have our Center for Teaching and Learning, so do our unions as well. And that if we're going to be able to take our profession in a place that we think it should be, it comes from teachers making recommendations, things like that. There are a lot of grants that are surrounded around being able to do some of that work. Being asked, unfortunately, far too much to go to DC and talk about what we're doing with our priority schools and how to make, we're coming together and talking about what are some strategies that we can use to make things better. We have commonality around that. Is there anything other? PAT in general, I mean, we are looking at, within the Instruction and Professional Development Committee, we have a variety of subgroups, but it's really creating the vision of the schools our students deserve. We had put together a committee in and of itself of about 20 educators from across the district, all different subject areas, grade levels, different ethnicities of teachers, and making sure that It was representative of all the different areas in our city and talking about a vision for our schools. So our next step is to do forums with the community. We talked to PTA and other parent groups about what does this look like and how do we actually create a vision for our schools so we can fight for something rather than always fighting against something.
Thank you so much. So just to wrap up, I just wanted to say again thank you to all of you on the committee. We're really excited about this work and look forward to hearing more as it rolls out. This is pretty, I'd say, historic for this district to be having this level of a comprehensive and collaborative look. So really exciting. And I also just want to say, for especially the folks who were here earlier and went home, to check out both the work that you're doing and look and keeping tabs on that as it rolls out, but also this state document, the New Path for Oregon. So I don't know if we can share like where the folks could access this, and you said there's a way to give comments, or is that only for districts? Can the public give comments as well? Okay.
There will be, my understanding is there will be public comment.
They're actually having forums.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to get, and maybe as a board we'll want to, respond officially, send a letter or something, since we did have the resolution last July. This goes a long way toward responding to that in terms of saying we need to reduce the amount of time and attention spent on high-stakes summative tests. Really exciting to see, as well as, of course, Nancy Golden's indication that we're not going to be labeling or sanctioning schools starting out with Smarter Balance. So really exciting work. Thank you so much, and keep up the great work. All right, so everyone maybe should stretch a little bit because we've got more on our agenda and important work. So we have next the 2015-16 budget staffing prioritization. So we are going to perform, speaking of exercises, a budget exercise on staffing prioritization similar to the one we did around the budget recently. And Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this item? And you can stretch too.
I would, and I'll introduce Antonio Lopez, who is the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of School Performance, and David Wind, our Assistant Chief Financial Officer. And part of what we are doing tonight is a board work session on staffing priorities to get your input on how you would prioritize staffing. Some of what we've talked about is the fact that this year we'll also be looking at the school-wide support table as one of the things we look at, and then the kinds of school-based staff that you would prioritize. And sorry, I'm going to ask people in the back if you'll kind of move yourselves out of the, because we can hear you down here. Thank you. Sorry about that. So anyway, tonight, what the goal of tonight's exercise is to hear feedback from the board about what you would prioritize both for school-wide staffing table as well as school-based staff that you think advance our work on the 3 priorities. Because I will be listening to this conversation tonight. On March 9th, I bring forward both a framework for the overall look at the budget, but also the proposal for staffing of schools, because we work on releasing that early, so we're out actually able to start our hiring process, and then the rest of the budget is not proposed in its entirety until the end of the month, until March 31st. So I'm listening intently to the dialogue tonight in terms of how you would prioritize school staffing decisions. So with that, Antonio Lopez and David Wind.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Smith, co-chairs Atkins and Knowles, directors, student representative. My name is Antonio Lopez. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of School Performance. As our superintendent has stated, this is an opportunity to hear from you in terms of looking at the staffing. What are the areas that are important to you? What do you prioritize? We will be here. Director Wind is going to go over the exercise and explain it, and we'll be here to answer any questions that you might have.
Actually, in terms of the exercise, I think it's pretty self-explanatory and you're familiar with it. There's a certain artificiality to this, which we will concede up front. Primarily, it's an opportunity for you to give us some indication of your priorities. It's an opportunity for you to give us an indication of some of your priorities, and to sort of talk about what you like, what you don't like, what you do differently, We've heard from 3 of you so far, so I've already plugged in your numbers, but you'll have an opportunity to, as you wish, to sort of talk about that. And, you know, I think really we just want to hear from you, why you made the choices you did, what you would have done if you had more, what you think is missing.
Great.
And with that, it's really all up to you. I know Director Adkins, Director Belisle, and Student Representative Joe Jaiswal have already sort of sent in some numbers, although Director Belisle said right up front that he used twice as many points as he was allocated, and he would be talking about that this evening. So, you know, that's all.
So, in the interest, Director McCurler, maybe we just kind of go down the line, hopefully in the interest of time, to be able to give.
Sure.
We want to
and
give
I'll be short and succinct, because like the last time, I found it hard to, for me personally, relevance, but I do want to share my own personal priorities on this. What, in terms of staffing, what would it take to get a higher level percentage of our high school graduates gaining 9 credits of college credit? So, you know, looking at that goal, and Bobby, you talked a lot about that as well. So staffing that, what does that look like, and what's our goal over the next 3 years? We've been very consistent about wanting more career technical education. So staffing priority, to me, that would be it. I would like to see the Benson program of tech geometry and tech algebra in every high school. I just don't think there's a reason not to do it. So what are the staffing requirements for that? I'd like to see more middle school hands-on learning opportunities. And finally, and again, all these things that are in the here are very good and valid, so I'm not discounting any of them. I was just talking about my priorities that weren't necessarily on there. The summer learning gap, and figuring out ways to address that from a staffing perspective.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Director Knowles?
Sure. I think as I went through these, I came down and a couple of different things that were important to me. One was support at each level for the social emotional aspects. So you're going to see numbers about counselors and at each of the levels. I also am very supportive of our CTE program that we're college and career readiness at the high school and then at the middle school, and believe that we need to support that adequately with staff if we really are doing it. And I've seen the plans for it, and it's really exciting, and we're going to need teachers for that, so there you go. Yeah. And then the other part that I looked at as I was doing this was equalizing between K-8s and middle schools and where we need to do that. So all of that said, I didn't go to 120, but I got close to 60. Depends on what you call close. So on A, I went for option 1 on that, which would provide an EA for our schools that are 80% underserved. And then I went down to high school graduation. In that section, E, I went for the 15, option 3, full-time, another full-time coordinator and full-time teacher in there. And then at the middle school, I went for option 2, which is a half-time for the person in the K-8s. I really think it's important that we push down our career technical education into the middle schools. I think that's where the big differences are going to be made. So, and then for disproportionate discipline, this was a really big priority for me. I went for a counselor, 1 FTE in every K-5, which was the middle option. And then also for the counselor in the K-8s in middle school, so that would be the middle option as well, option 2. And because I believe that the arts help hold our students in school, just like sports and career technical education, and because I'd like to see us with a continuum of arts curriculum across K-12, I started, and maybe I'll just go up anyway, but anyway, I started with 24, the middle option, and then I realized I was getting way over my points, so I went down to 9 on that. Not giving up on it, though. And then also thought that the school secretaries, K-8s, also very important to provide more support in the office and for families who are coming into the schools. And having listened to our representatives from PFSP last week, or maybe it was the week before, about substitutes, that really rung home for me. And then, of course, I had her comments in our packet this time as well, so I got a chance to look at them again, and that made a lot of sense to me to increase the number of substitutes, so I gave that 5 points as option number 1.
Sorry, for secretaries, which option did you do there?
The secretaries, first one, option 1, 6 points.
And then 5 for
Okay.
substitutes.
There you
37. Great, thank you. Okay, so I'll
It's
go.
close to 60.
Yeah.
87 is the new 60.
I'm closer. I'm at 63. So as always, these are Sophie's choices, and yeah, we would love to be able to do all of them. But I guess I went with kind of 2 general principles. One is sort of sprinkling smaller amounts, because all of these are so important, and the principle that having even another half-time person can sometimes make a big difference, as much as we would like to invest more heavily. And I also went much more for the lower grades, K through 8 grades. I feel we've invested a lot of resource the last couple budgets in our high schools, which is great, but there's a really glaring needs in our lower grades. So that's where I put the most emphasis. And I just would also note, for me, this isn't so hard and fast. I mean, in an area where having a school secretary, for example, can make a big difference, obviously, in a principal's job and their day and their ability to be an instructional leader. So these are so intertwined. So if someone were to say to me, well, we really have to do this instead of that, given that they're intertwined, this isn't like my, falling on my sword about these, but this felt to me like a reasonable mix. So as you see, I put a couple down in the kindergarten, the EA support in the kindergarten attendance, the consistent middle level programs at K-8s. The counselors felt really important to me, both in terms of supporting the principals and the teachers and the college and career readiness. So I put points there. Arts, school secretaries, again, that whole piece of being able to keep the school together, as well as increasing the special ed substitutes. So that's how I ended up at 63 points.
Nice work, 63 points.
I wish it were more.
So, what I appreciate, while it's a contrived exercise, what it points out, one, is that we are far from getting back to even a base level of service, because every one of these is something that our students and our families should be able to expect from our schools.
Yeah.
So you call them Sophie's choices, Ruth, and I just want to start with that, because we will have to make decisions, which is what I like about this exercise, is that I can talk about all the things I believe in, right? I can talk about I value CTE and we should push it down to the lowest level, and we should do career ready, and all of our kids that are able and capable and ready, we should get them the supports to have college as soon as they're possible. We can talk about everybody should have arts, and not just music, but they should have dance, and it should be alive, it should be exciting, they should be on the job training, that there shouldn't be walls between us. And that sounds great, but at some point we have to make investment decisions. And so that's what I appreciate about, contrived as it is, and coming from the guy who overspent by double the number of points. And part of the reason why I did that is because I started with the 58 for improving the staffing allocation for grades 1, 2. I don't know how we're going to get improved graduation rates if we don't improve our elementary student-to-teacher ratio. Right now we are out of whack, and it was understandable reason why we overinvested or have invested in high school. Again, it's not overinvested. To characterize that is inappropriate. It's an investment in high school, but we have huge elementary level classrooms, and it's what I often hear about when I'm out talking about it. And people, it's related to instructional model. It's due to a lot of things, but so I put all my eggs in that basket, saying, I don't know how we can go on. If a teacher doesn't have the time to spend with the kid in the classroom to teach them to read, sending them to the library probably might not be the best shot, because they're not going to be excited to be at the library because they don't know how to read because the teacher had too many kids. So that's why I started with my 58. So having made my point about elementary staffing ratio, I took the time to say targeted supports at focus and priority schools. I am very concerned. We were going to have a report later tonight, funded programs, and we're going to hear a little bit about focus and priority schools. And I'm a little concerned that I don't see enough movement in our focus and priority academically. And so my worry isn't investing more in the sense that it's clear they need more supports, but we clearly don't have a strategy, or I don't feel like we have an effective strategy, which concerns me about investing some more. Throwing more money at it without a strategy that we see as working concerns me. But that being said, I prioritize figuring out what that is for focused priority schools and investing in it. Next, I went with kindergarten attendance support. Director Morton often, or last week, talked a little bit about an early warning system, and was concerned that we called our 9th grade detection as an early warning system because it wasn't early enough. And so I put my interpretation on that is that kindergarten attendance, those students who are struggling to attend at kindergarten is our earliest indicator once they're with us as to whether or not they're going to succeed by the end of school. And so if we can orient ourselves to receive the incoming kindergartners and support those families in a way that they have a stable beginning, again, I think that will lay a foundation that will pay dividends in the years to come. So that's why I put more points there. I think I put some points down there in music, down in arts expansion. Again, similar to Director Knowles, I think this is something that not only keeps kids in school, but I think that it complements, if I think about reading by 3rd grade, disproportionate discipline, all of our outcomes are going to be affected by that. And again, I'm going to keep putting a plug in for music education, that we should have an articulated K-12 music, not just art or not just dance, but that should come first as a bedrock. And when I look at neighboring districts who are beating the odds with their demographic population, it is because they have held firmly on a music arts curriculum. And then finally, secretaries, they're vital again to supporting our families as they come into schools. And they support teachers. They're everything from the nurse, when the nurse from MESD isn't there, to lockdown folks, to supporting principals and teachers and parents. So that's why I put that there.
Great, thanks. Director Regan.
So I'm trying to understand when we do this exercise, which feels really contrived, like what does the 60 points represent in terms of dollars or people? And the reason I'm asking is, next year we have a new element to our local option, and we're going to be adding 45 teachers. Is that part of the 60, or is it not part of the 60? What does the 60 even mean?
So the 60 is, in this exercise, is essentially 60 FTE, and that is approximately what we would get with the $4 to $4.5 million of additional local option money. So it's not to say that this is the only money we will have available for staffing. We're in the process of figuring those numbers out, so we could have more than that, but it's a starting point. I mean, to Director Belisle's point, I think you could make a credible argument for option 3 for all 15 of these, which would take 452, and we're not going to have that much. So we're going to have to make some choices. But that's where the 60 came from, Director Regan. It's essentially the extra money that we will get by virtue of the urban renewal piece of it.
Okay, so I would encourage us to remember what we said during the campaign in terms of how those funds would be used, which is teaching positions. or PAT-affiliated teaching positions. And so, you know, if you look at a school secretary, it's not a teaching position. If you look at custodian, if you look at, so it's part of the reason that I was a little concerned about the way this exercise is being laid out, because I mean, clearly the focus of those extra local option dollars are for teachers in the classroom. So, so that threw me off in terms of the exercise. So I'll just go through and do some of the priorities. I think my colleagues laid out great priorities. Rather than necessarily repeating them all, I can mention a couple of things that haven't been mentioned. I want to make sure that we're offering our high school kids a full day, just like we offer our middle school kids, just like we offer our elementary school kids. And I'd like to know what it costs to have, assume every single kid has taken 8 classes. So I'd like to understand things that are missing. I'd like to understand the cost if we were to perhaps give our students, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, you know, the PCC Compass test for math, and then offered them the remedial piece. If they don't pass it, then the remedial math course that PCC offers, let's offer that to our kids as seniors so that we at least graduate kids ready to start at PCC day 1 without doing remedial coursework. So I'd like to understand what that will cost and if it's even feasible. I would like us to go back to the high school audit that we did a while ago. It was a brilliant audit. We got tons of information on things that other districts are doing, and the 2 areas in particular were Hillsborough had care teams, which included social workers, and Beaverton had the graduation coaches. And so I'd like to understand, you know, whether I know we've looked at the models, but where have we landed when it comes to those? Arts, I would like to see us really focusing on arts in grades 6 through 8. We have the arts tax K-5. I'm thrilled. We need to look at the articulation all the way up. So I'm not sure that I would invest more in K-5 until we at least have a minimal investment, you know, per student at the 6-8 level too. So my focus would be on the 6-8 at that and trying to bring the articulation up, and none of it's enough. The AEs in kindergarten, if you're looking there, that's the EAs in kindergarten is what I would be looking at. The education assistants in the kindergartens, especially in our high poverty kindergartens, I would think that would give us a real boost. Certainly making sure that we have libraries that are open. So in terms of missing also, there's, you know, we've talked about outdoor school. It's not a big budget item. I don't know if it's assumed in here or not, but I want to make sure that we're talking about that. I also want to talk about the board auditor position. The audit committee met, and we are actively looking for the other 2 members of the audit committee. So this is the board performance auditor. Right now, I think our budget for that position is really minimal, and I think it's probably critical for us to be expanding that a little bit so we can continue to have a functional board performance auditor. So I just want to put that in the mix. Again, it's not a big budget item like some of these would be, but you asked what's missing. So I just wanted to add that in.
And just for clarification, this one's really school-based staffing, and then both of the items you just mentioned will come as part of the next part of the budget.
Good.
So the bigger, the one by between March 9th and March 31st, that's where that conversation will happen.
Thank you. And I guess for me, the biggest thing is on school-based staffing, I want to hear from our principals on what's going to move the dial. I want to hear from our principals and to the extent it's possible for our teachers. I mean, they're going to know. They're going to know what are the most critical needs, and I'd be really curious to have a presentation from our principals. I mean, have them do this exercise for us. Wouldn't that be exciting? And here's what this is where our principals think we should put our money. This is where the teachers think about it. I mean, I'd love to expand it out to parents and students and where they think. But to me, if you're looking at school-based staffing, and if you believe that our principals are qualified instructional leaders and we're trying to move the dime, I want them to take this, and I want to see the results. that would be really amazing to me. So,
So
just a
Director
suggestion.
Reagan, just to address principals on the staffing committee, we have 4 principals part of this, and actually they went through this exercise too.
And do you have the results?
Yes, we have.
Good, that's what I want to see.
And we actually did a survey of all of our principals at Leadership Academy
That's what-
where they did the 3 most important, that we can share the data from that
Yeah,
as well.
I would totally like
Yeah.
to see that, because that's on the ground. So, I mean, I can look at this and I can say, oh, I think this would have huge impact, but guess what?
Yeah.
They're on the ground, and I want
We can share
that.
what we've collected.
Great. Okay, thanks so much. Director Buell?
I'm kind of a Tom Curler fan, so I didn't really do the exercise as it's laid out, but I do have what I think we should be doing, and Mr. Belisle's comments, I think, ring true. I've got a whole list of things that I think are important. I'm going to give those. All of them help the disparity issue, every one, and all but 2 really work on the graduation. 2 of them help the disparity, but the graduation is way down the line. So CTE, we need CTE to get organized, and we're going to need to be able to staff it. Middle school electives, PE, art, and so forth. We need to get that out there so that holds kids in school. We need reading teachers, way beyond what we have. Way beyond what we have. We need to get those kids who can't read and teach them to read, and the way you do that is reading teachers, and you can restructure the classroom reading and so forth to some degree. That helps and all sorts of things, but really in the end, the kids who can't read, they need reading teachers to sit down with them and teach them to read. We need librarians, and we should have a certificated librarian in every school. At least half-time, I would say right now we could afford half-time in elementary schools, and K-5, maybe K-8, I'm not sure what the question is, depends on how big the school is, and full-time in high schools and some of the middle grades, but we just need to do that, period. Get that in, because that's the reading bolsterization that we're not getting. I'm not sure bolsterization is a word. We need to do outdoor school, 5 days, period. Next year, I hope to see it in the budget from our superintendent this year. Won't have to fight about it later after July 1st, maybe, again. We need counselors that we don't have. I think we can make that stronger, possibly. We need social service coordinator and people who can go out into people's homes. And we need, along with that, the regular people, I think and their argument was pretty good. They said, we used to have somebody working with the restorative justice and so forth, and they were really putting in the effort. We need to have those people, if we can get them, if we can find them and put them in. I think maybe we can, at least to some degree. So those social service coordinators, people will go out into homes. We need to strengthen our athletic programs way beyond where we are, continue to give money out there for middle school athletics, and we have to begin to move to eliminate the fees for athletics that we have in this school system. $200 to play a sport is absurd and ridiculous. To do that, they should be able to play a sport for nothing. And then we would get many more people involved, and when we did that, guess what? They're going to stick around and do much better in school. That's the way that works. Not just athletics, but also drama and those other types of things that pull kids in. And I like having a full day in high school, absolutely. But that's kind of off the thing. And class size, we need to keep working on class size, obviously. I mean, it's just, and I think Greg is right here where he says, here's your nice list, Steve, but where does all the money for this come from? Well, that's where there's 2 parts to this. It's the part that's not here. I flip it over in the back, but I still don't see it. Where does the money come from? The money comes from money that we have, obviously sounds like we have a little, but it also comes from the process that we're doing. We're spending huge amounts of money on process that we should be spending directly into our schools. And that's where a lot of the money comes. It comes from the $10 million, the $14 million of consulting fees. We cut that to $4 million of consulting fees. We had $10 million. That's 110 or so FTE, and I'll take and do the 110 for you right here. That's just with that deal. Let's start looking across the board at these other process things that we're doing. Let's start not filling some of our things that go empty in administration and spend that on reading teachers or librarians. Let's start funneling the money. Make a big spigot and funnel that money right down into the classroom. Forget, I like TOSAs, I'm a big TOSA fan, but I'm not sure we can afford TOSAs when we can't afford reading teachers to work directly with children. I'm not sure we can afford academic coaches when we can't afford reading teachers to work directly with children. We can't put a librarian, a certificated librarian in there that's going to teach children to read. We've got 3 initiatives, and we need to begin to get serious about the reading one, and we're not. Oh, we care about it, and we talk about it, but we're not really serious about actually getting every kid to read because we don't have the reading teachers down there that we used to have. We used to have them. At one point, we eliminated 72 of our reading teachers. We used to have those people, and we don't have them anymore. So that's an important thing for us to be doing.
Great. And
getting that money down and figuring out where it's going to come from. I suggest that in the budget that we start to make a pool of where we can save money, and we put that savings into a pool, and then we draw that to spend it directly on things in the classroom. And we cut, if we cut like crazy, if we have to. The testing is costing us a fortune, we know that. It'd be great to cut it and put that money into reading teachers, put that money into librarians, put that money into counselors, where you actually have those people who work directly with children every day. That's where I want to go. And we just spent $15 million. We spent 8, and then we spent 7.2, and we didn't hardly buy a person in that classroom. We bought
So
all
thank
this other
you.
junk.
Let's move on to Student Representative Giswell. Thanks so much.
So I started with 25 for the EA support in kindergarten, just to give the students the support they need starting out, so you won't need to fix their reading later, and just really making sure we target students entering school. And then for the high school ratio, just to have adults in the classroom for students to build relationships with, which will keep them coming back to class. So then for the next one, I'm actually going to change it to eliminate the school leadership and then boost the counselors up to level 2, just because after going to school today and seeing the amount of students just waiting around in the counseling center, it really is important that students have counselors. And thinking about when I applied to college this fall, the amount of time that my counselor spent on my stuff, and then the fact that they have 40 other students, they really just don't have time and they're overworked. And we really need to make sure that they can give the support they need to students. So that's really where I was focused, is counselors too. Talking to a lot of students too in Super SAC and across the districts, they're very concerned about counselors. And I think that's something for students, especially high school students, they really do want.
Great. Thank you so much. It's really great to have voice directly from your experience seeing the lines of students waiting for help. So, sure.
Sorry, one comment that I forgot to mention that I didn't see up there, and I just want to make sure that also gets put on the table, is I had mentioned before when I went to New Orleans with the Courageous Conversations Summit, the remarkable results folks were finding across the country with their Title IX, not Title IX, Title VII Indian education. And really, what they were doing is focus not on more school, not on more academic supports, but really how do we give them a cultural identity? How do we give them their history? So I just want to call out, and not just for Native Americans, but for many of our cultural groups, what we have disparities, and we need to directly invest in strategies that may not be what we've typically done to provide them the supports that they need.
Great. So I know there's lots and lots of things we would like to see happen, so that's a lot of input, but I hope that gives you what you need for tonight.
Yep, nope, that was helpful, thank you.
Okay, thank you so
guys.
much.
Thank you.
All right, so just a note on the agenda, due to staff illness, the funded programs update that was originally on the agenda has been rescheduled for next week's meeting, so we won't be hearing that tonight. Given that we're a half hour behind in our agenda, as much as we want to hear that, that might be a silver lining, but on the other hand, next week's agenda is now all that much longer. So as always, we're going to ask both staff and our colleagues to stay on topic and move quickly. So with that, moving on to enrollment balancing and 2015-16 recommendations. So each year by policy, staff conducts an enrollment and capacity analysis of schools and programs. So we're about to hear recommendations for this coming year. Superintendent Smith, do you want to introduce the item?
I do. So Judy Brendan, who's the Director of Enrollment and Transfer, will provide this report, and then it's also Tony Magliano, who's our Chief Operating Officer, will also contribute to the presentation in terms of plans for overcrowding and how we're planning to address that for the coming year. Judy.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Superintendent Smith, and thank you, Tony, for sitting in the hot seat. And John Isaacs is here as well. We're going to share a little bit of information on where we are with DBRAC, and so if you have questions about that towards the end, he could assist with answering those. A couple of things that I am here to share with you tonight, and then we'll hear your questions, hopefully be able to answer any of them. First of all, where are we in terms of our overall district enrollment and the trends that we're seeing this year, and then what are we doing about those urgent issues that we've been working on for a little while. A little bit of the context. Two things. First of all, you do have a policy that advises us to go ahead every year and do an assessment of our enrollment trends. That's one of the reasons that you have a report and that I'm here. And the second is the Jefferson Enrollment Balancing Resolution from 2 years ago that called for us to do systemic work around improving our enrollment conditions. Some of that you've already spent significant time on recently, and those enrollment and transfer policy changes that you just adopted are now moving into place. Our district-wide boundary review is still a work in progress, so we'll be talking a little bit about that tonight. Okay, so the big picture, 6 straight years of K-12 enrollment increases. You've seen this graphic before. We could expect as many as 6,000 additional students in the next 15 years. So that means that a student that's born tonight, by the time they're in high school, will be in a high school with 6,000 more students than a high schooler would be today. And we have to figure out how to best educate those students and make sure that we have room for all of them. In our annual assessment, we compare enrollment at each school to a base school size targets. And it's just a first level of analysis, and we've discussed this with you before. These targets are not meant to be very precise, and they're not, but they give us a starting point and a common language to talk around. Schools that are very small, we consider those under-enrolled, and they may need additional staff resources in order to provide strong core programs. Some of the issues that you just discussed and the priorities that you have for wanting strong electives across schools is in part because of under-enrollment in some schools. Conversely, we have schools with populations so large they may not have enough classrooms for teachers. So when that class size goes down because of additional dollars spent in the classroom, we'd better make sure that we have spaces for those students. This year, what I'm going to show you is that almost half of our schools that we evaluated are outside those basic target ranges. And this really isn't new information. It's disturbingly similar to what you've seen in the past. I wanted to point out that there was a typographical error in the memo that you had before. So that you see on the K-8, and I've used some red text there, we actually only have 8 schools that we could technically consider under-enrolled this year. It was 9 in your report. So that means that only 63% of our K-8 schools are outside the boundaries, or outside of these targets, not 66%. And at the end of all of it, when you add them all up, we have 34 of our 69 schools that are outside of targets. That's only 49% instead of 35 of 69, which was 51%. Just in case you were doing the math at home. I want to run you through some quick graphics to give you a visual. At this time of night, maybe more data and numbers would be less helpful. So of just what our schools look like from these basic enrollment measures. This first is our elementary schools. Our target is 450 students for an elementary school, and we consider the school under-enrolled or far below the target if there are 75 students below that, or 375. You can see that the schools that are in blue, let's see if I don't know if I had it? All right, thank you. All right, so these blue with the shading are schools that fall far below what our enrollment target is. If you looked a little bit in here, you would see that there's additional schools that are really close within that target line. The red lines are schools where there are more teachers than classrooms today. And you can see that with some of these really large schools, and when you look on the chart that you have, even more schools could be falling in that category. So that's where we are with K-5s. When we get to K-8s, even greater levels of variability. As I mentioned, 8 under-enrolled schools, including these multicolored ones. And then I think it's 9 schools that, despite the fact that their sizes, their actual enrollment is very different, have more teachers than students in the building. These two here, Bridger and Skyline, are schools that are both too small for our target enrollment and are far below that target, and too large for the buildings that they're housed in. Yep. So as a reminder, because of variability in our building sizes, the structure that we have set in those buildings is often too big. If the school were the size that we want it to be, the enrollment were the size that we'd like it to be, in order to make sure that we're providing strong staffing and resources to those kids. So this is a conundrum that we continue to face. At our middle school level, it's a simpler picture. We have a smaller number of middle schools across the district. More of them are within our target range. I mentioned before that we're a growing enrollment district. 6 straight years of growing enrollment means by now some of our middle schools are actually closer to that target size than they were. So last year, there were 4 middle schools, including Gray and Selwood, that were below the 500 bar, and now there's only 2, Lane and George. And none of our schools are calculated as technically overcrowded, that is, more teachers than classrooms. But I want to point out a couple of things on that. One is that means for West Sylvan, to the far side, that's because this includes all the classrooms on 2 campuses. So they're not overcrowded because they're already split between 2 campuses. And if I were to go back to Beverly Cleary, you could see that the same would be true for Beverly Cleary. In that case, they're split across 3 campuses. Okay, so finally, where are we with high schools? We set targets during high school system design of 1350. And the goal of some of our enrollment strategies was to have as many schools as possible within 150 students of that. We have 2 of our comprehensives that are below that, both seeing growing enrollment, but still a ways below that target line.
Why don't you have Benson on that list?
These targets apply to neighborhood schools only. So the target for Benson is not the same as the target for a comprehensive. And if I were to take you back to our middle schools or elementaries, the targets that we set, for example, for a Da Vinci middle school is 450 students, which is below the comprehensive school target. Different schools with different curriculum aren't within that target group. Thank you for asking that.
And so, okay.
Okay. Okay, so I just want to point out something that was probably obvious to you, but I'm going to point it out anyway. These targets are loose targets. There are so many schools that are outside them now. If they were tighter targets, we'd have even more of our K-5s and 8s that would show up as over and under enrolled. And so because of that, our systemic enrollment efforts that we have underway right now are really focused at those elementary and middle grades. It doesn't mean that our high school issues are not important or worth your attention, but following high school system design, we have this huge backlog of elementary, middle grades issues that we're hoping to stay focused on. Okay. And with that in mind, by golly, we have a number of schools that have been feeling growing pains. And I wanted to point out just with this graphic that we learn about that in a number of ways. So there's central input like the analysis that I just briefly showed you, plus we work with people in different departments in school and assistant superintendents, et cetera. But we also get a ton of input from our schools, from our principals who are working with their site counselors, their teachers, their PTAs, trying to resolve issues in their buildings. And so it's the combination of that input, both from top down and bottom up, that gets us the smallest possible list that we can work on of our urgent overcrowding needs. And I want to also mention that we're going to be talking specifically about schools that are overcrowded. We are extremely aware that we've got some under-enrollment issues, which at this point we're not looking at moving kids necessarily to resolve those issues, but things may come back to you through the budget and staffing cycle to see how those issues will be taken care of. So what I'd like to do now is quickly just walk you through some of the schools that made the highest list, our hot list for this year. There are many other schools that are feeling very, very warm that are also wondering what we're going to do for them. But I'm going to walk you through these, and then, as I said, we can take your questions. And in alpha order, no priority here, just A to Z. We have Access and Beverly Cleary. The overcrowding issue has been with Beverly Cleary, but because they co-locate at the Rose City Park campus this year with Access, I've included them. So what you can see up here are some of the things that we've done over time. The school, Beverly Cleary, has been closed for years. We've done a number of things to try and maximize space at the Fernwood and Holyrood campuses, but at the end of doing that, it was clear that it wasn't enough. So 2 grades moved into the Rose City Park campus this year, co-located with Access. We've looked at a number of different strategies, tried a number of ways to see if we could reconfigure and get back down to 2 campuses next year. We don't believe we can. And that has to do with a lot of different things. Primarily, it has to do with the high numbers of K-2 students assigned to Beverly Cleary and the limited amount of space on all 3 of those campuses for having a lot of young kids there. And Tony can give you lots more information about that if you're interested. But so it looks like Beverly Cleary, unfortunately, will have to maintain the 3-campus arrangement next year. We are looking at dividing 1 or 2 of the very large rooms that are on the main level, so a level that young kids can be in, at the Rose City Park campus to help the 2 programs co-locate and maximize use of that space. We are also promoting voluntary transfers from Beverly Cleary for families who are very concerned about this, and in particular Irvington, which is a school very nearby that's had lower class size, and is a school that families can, if they petition, would be allowed to transfer to. Next up is Chapman, another school with consistent growth over the last 5 years, largely due to new housing development. Here's some of the things that we've done to try and alleviate issues in the past. What we see for the coming year is to continue our voluntary transfer program, particularly to Ainsworth. Our transportation department is looking right now to see if they can actually site a bus stop inside the Chapman boundary to go up to Ainsworth to provide incentive for this. And you can see that there's 1 grade level at Chapman that's probably going to have larger class sizes next year because there just aren't enough classrooms. So that's the antithesis of what you were discussing a few moments ago, improving class size. In this case, it's higher class sizes because there just aren't enough classrooms in the building. Next up is our Clark building, which is shared by our Creative Science K-8 school and a large Head Start program. So Creative Science moved in 2008 and was authorized by the board to grow to 2 sections per grade level beginning in 2009. In the past, the 2 programs have worked very collaboratively to share their space for support, electives, etc. We've also reduced the Head Start program in the past. But because of how Head Start needs to be co-located, we can't pare it down too small and still maintain a strong program. The decision this year is that the Head Start program will move from the Clark Building out to Lane Middle School, where there's available classrooms. The one silver lining, if you will, is that moving to Lane does bring the program very close to an area with a real concentrated need for early education services. So that's one benefit. There are a lot of things about all of these solutions that are not good. Like, there's no one out there that's pleased with any of these, so this is tough news everywhere. But we do want to point out anywhere that people are being positive and finding the bright spots where they can. Harrison Park is a large K-8 school in outer southeast. It's been growing quite a bit, and that growth has actually slowed, but high number of support staff needed in that space, and lots of spaces needed for small group work, ESL centers, etc. In the past, all of these schools have been close to transfers for years, and we've done non-classroom divisions to make more support spaces. Working with the school staff there, facility staff has come up with a plan to convert industrial arts area to more functional classroom and support spaces, so that's one good thing. And it's also an increase probably next year in the class size at one grade level. Right now they happen to be able to have very small class sizes, so it would go from like 17 to 22, still below district average, but it does mean fewer sections next year in one grade. That's the strategy to make everybody fit in Harrison Park next year. Couple more schools. Kelly K-5, which is also where our district-wide Russian immersion program is located, and a very large Head Start program. It's the Russian immersion program that's maturing, so 2 sections per grade level means they need an extra classroom every year. Every year we've looked at how to accomplish that. We've limited our neighborhood transfers. We've shifted supports that were in the building out to the annex. We've maximized every possible space that we can. This year, we did find one more thing. There's a room that Head Start uses that could be a regular classroom. That's where their motor skills space is, and they're going to move that into a common area, which is, again, not optimal for how they run the program, but it does free up that classroom that's needed for next year. At Sitten, another K-5 school that's co-located with a Head Start. Since the Head Start program's been on site, I think it's been 4, maybe 5 years now, that neighborhood program has actually grown. Children start earlier and they're staying, and that neighborhood growth is exactly what we would want to see. We have been limiting transfers into Sitten in the past, and we considered but rejected the idea of moving that Head Start classroom into the Clarendon Early Learning Center. There's a lot of advantages of being co-located in a wonderful center like Clarendon, but there are disadvantages as well, particularly for families with limited transportation options. So the strategy for this year is to add a 2-classroom modular, which will right-size the Sitten building, not just for 1 year, but we believe for many years. So this is one case where it's a significant investment, but we see the real potential to keep an important neighborhood together from the earliest moment and to stay together through. Skyline, a unique K-8 school in the far northwest edge of our district. Neighborhood growth, it's one of our smallest buildings, so every little change makes a big impact there. Neighborhood growth has been quickly filling. It's a very small building. It has very strict zoning regulations. Now, in the past, we've actually allowed some transfers into Skyline, in part to maximize the staff that's there. So if there's room in the grade level, you might as well fill it. Now, because of neighborhood growth, there isn't enough space for both transfers and neighborhood. And while with the transfers sort of age out, we've got a squeeze moment. Facilities staff has worked hard to figure out some internal remodeling that allows us to recapture 1 classroom and make enough space for them next year, and there will be no more transfers into Skyline. And finally, we have East and West Sylvan, which I mentioned before, doesn't look overcrowded on the chart, in part because they've been split for 10 years now across 2 campuses, and the community asked us to reconsider that. This year, because of high enrollment at 6th grade over the last couple of years, only half of the 6th grade fits into the East Sylvan building. So you've got half the 6th grade at East Sylvan, half at West Sylvan, along with all of the 7th and 8th grade. There is a plan that would allow internal remodeling at West Sylvan so that all of the 6th and 8th grade students could attend that single campus together. And there's a small amount of operational savings that could be recouped, not enough to offset the full cost of the change, but something that just to be aware of. So that is also one of the strategies for change next year. Okay, just very quickly, planning has started for every one of the schools that we just walked through, and Tony can tell you more about those details if you're interested. The funds for pretty much all of those capital improvements were allocated in fall 2014, so it's not a part of the budget request that you're seeing at this moment. However, if there are any additional funds, those would be included in your 15-16 budget request that will be coming forward. And I just wanted to very briefly touch and get us back up, out of the individual schools to the big picture. This has been a very uncomfortable period of time. Growth is a wonderful thing if we manage it well. We're still being very reactive, and we're looking for that moment when we turn the corner and we're proactively planning for growth. The district-wide boundary review that we're planning, we think it will be a pivotal part of that. So what we can look forward to is our Values, Growth, and Equity Survey, which is going to launch after spring break, and that's an opportunity to gather input from our entire community about what's going to drive that boundary review process now and in the future. Our wonderful DBRAC committee is meeting routinely. It's represented at the board by Director Knowles and Director Morton. And they're on track to deliver back to the superintendent and then to you a framework and policy alignment recommendation that will incorporate that survey data and then be the basis on which we would set options for new boundary scenarios. What will the new boundary map look like? When will they come out? Staff will be working on those in late summer after that framework has been confirmed. And then all of that comes back for review through the committee and the public and eventually through the superintendent and to you in late fall. We would like to, by this time next year, be with you, know that you voted, and set in place at least the first of those boundary changes. So that's what's coming up, so that maybe in the future these conversations might start to be a little different, but we've got a lot of work to do in advance of that. So that's where we are, and we are open for your questions. Right?
Great, thanks so much. Questions down here? No? Director Regan.
So, first of all, I'm really impressed with all the staff work on this, so thank you. I know when we got our original presentation a while back about our Tier 1 and Tier 2 schools and what were we going to do, and we asked DBRAC to the District Boundary Review Committee to take a look at that and then look at the long term. They kind of bounced it back to staff and just said, you know what, let us focus on the long term. So I'm impressed with the obvious amount of work that's gone into this, and I'm hoping that the fact that this room isn't filled with people means that the school communities are all pretty up to speed on what the plans are, and we're informed and invested in all of the above. Is that a fair assessment?
So last week's senior directors had conversations with principals and principals with their communities. So that's my assumption at this point too, that it's as good as it could be for the communities right now, and they understand what the plan is for their buildings.
Okay. So I would agree with Judy's statement that growth is a good thing. It's much better than declining enrollment and closing schools, but it brings all kinds of other aches and pains along the way. As I was looking through the different suggestions here, and again, not having much community feedback at this point, which again, hopefully that's a good sign. The two things I did notice are that Chapman and Harrison Park, the solutions will require, at least in one grade each, increase, a higher than average student size. And so I want to make sure that we're paying attention to that, since by going to a higher class size, they're not, we don't have to make an additional investment in a portable or something else. But at the same time, if we need an education assistant or something in that classroom, I hope that we will be considering that for those communities. So I just wanted to kind of put that in. Good. So, and the other thing I also wanted to mention is with East and West Sylvan coming together, one of the other benefits of that, if you will, is that the East Sylvan building was like one of our first or second worst conditioned buildings in our inventory. And we will have an opportunity to sell or repurpose or do something with that building as we go to. So I'm pleased that we're finally getting the community back together. I think it worked well for what it was, but I know there's been a real angst in the community to bring everybody back together. So that's exciting that we were able to work with them on that. Thanks.
Thanks. Dr. Buell.
How do we decide who goes to where in the East and West Sylvan now? In other words, you got a 6th grade, part of them are in one school, part in the other. Do they get to choose and
No, they'll all go back to
option?
West.
You mean for the current year? How was the decision made
How
for the
did we
current
do
year?
that? Yeah.
It was made largely based on feeder patterns. So kids weren't allowed to.
Didn't
So
really ask to choose.
some schools went in one direction, other feeder schools went in the other.
We've shared this with communities.
The information has been.
What's on this sheet right here, we've gone out to Chapman and told them this, and all the people in the community whose children go to Chapman have gotten this information. You get this grade, don't your children go to Chapman? I thought you went to Chapman. They went to, where's the, I can't remember. So we've shared this with all the Chapman community?
I can let you know what we've shared with Chapman if you'd like.
No, I want to know if we shared it with all these communities.
It was communicated
To the
through the
principal,
senior
you said.
directors to the principals for the
Okay.
purpose of sharing with their communities before
We're in the
hearing it for the
process
first
now.
time tonight. Correct.
Okay, so when this came before the school board this evening, we really hadn't necessarily shared it with them to give them a chance to be here or anything.
We've met with all those communities a number of times over the past several years with West Sylvan,
Last
and
month, and
East
told them what the
Sylvan.
decision was, and then got their feedback on that?
So Director Beal, if I could, in the interim, as Tony said, we've been out visiting these schools and letting them know what we're considering along the way so that they could give feedback into that. And now they know what the decision has been.
By knowing that we've shared with the community, with all the teachers and all the parents, what the final thing is.
So I would not be correct in using the word all.
Okay. Just
But
checking.
we've made an effort to be at every single one of these schools and to meet with the staff and parents who attend those meetings, to work with the principals to make sure that information goes out through newsletters, is available at principal coffees, is shared at Connect to Kindergartens, is shared in other ways that are appropriate within that school.
Whatever happened to Phil Kiesling and his group? Haven't seen him around lately.
So
I thought they were making the decisions on this, a lot of the boundary decisions on the boundaries, how we work with them and go through that, but I haven't seen those people around lately. Are they gone or?
So they're working with us with the district-wide boundary review committee, and as Bobby just described, we had both the short-term overcrowding situations and then the long-term district-wide boundary review. We sent the list of short-term overcrowding situations to DBRAC for consideration to say which is where Phil Kiesling's group is advising, so they're part of that group. We sent the short-term list to DBRAC and said, would you consider that any of these might have boundaries as a potential solution? They basically handed it back to us and said, no, we think actually trying to do a boundary thing for a short-term solution complicates and clouds the bigger effort that we're trying to do. So they handed it back to us to say, please come up with other solutions and let them focus on the long-term work, and that's what Phil's group is working on with us. So they're helping us do the value survey that we're doing. They're staffing DBRAC and coming and facilitating and also doing consulting with us on DBRAC. But two different things. They said, keep this, do technical solutions, keep going where we preserve the bigger conversations around boundaries as the work that we're enlisting DBRAC for.
That's the big takeaway, from me in a facilities role, because When you talk about taking money from the classrooms or taking money away from being able to take care of our buildings, you know, what you witnessed up there is nearly $1 million in work to fix these, what I would classify most of them as short-term fixes until we can get a framework around conducting a district-wide boundary that right-sizes students in our schools to create a strong program. So these are not optimal. You know,
I understand that. Well, we still, has anybody ever gone down again? I keep talking about this and talk to the city, just let them do reasonable, from time to time, reasonable portables for short periods of time on our thing to take care of some of these problems, or we don't have to move the Head Start. We slap in a portable for $60,000, which is, we both know you can do that. And instead of $500,000, and we gone down to, I just still think we should go down to the city and say, we need more flexibility on this.
We've worked with the city, and the ones at Fabian
gone
are.
down and said, you guys are screwing us over for $1 million. Every time we put in 2 portables where it could be $120,000. Just doesn't make sense. Okay, thank you, Tom.
Okay.
Appreciate it as always.
Director Knowles.
Have you ever seen a portable for $80,000?
Well, the portable itself is about
Sure.
$100,000. It's all of the
But you have to put it
permitting
in.
and foundation. You
Right.
know, the ones we put at Fabian are more temporary, but it's still an expensive venture to put down a modular.
I researched it, and I've
It's
seen it
not-
for $60,000.
Excuse me,
No,
it's not,
just thought I'd tell you.
it's a lot
I
more
didn't
than
know.
just
No, it's not
a
necessarily.
building you have to put it in. Anyway, so that's not really what my question or what my comment was. First of all, thank you very much for the report. It's just the same as it was last year almost, you know, the same school, same problems. And I'll just follow up on what you were saying, Judy, because I have on my iPad in front of me the letter from Terry Geist, who's the principal of Beverly Cleary, that she sent out to her families. I think it came out a couple of days ago. About the decisions for Beverly Cleary, and I'm actually going to a coffee chat there tomorrow morning to meet with those parents again. I think this is the 6th time I've been to Beverly Cleary, and I know that you guys are there a lot of the times with me, and you're there a lot more than I'm there. So I'm very confident that you're getting the message out, and I know that these communities have been at this for a while, and they are very active and very vocal, and it's hard for us to. There isn't a great solution right now, so I know it puts us all in a difficult position. But the other question I had was around right sizing. So we talk about some of these schools that are not even big enough to hold our programs. If we just put a straight K-8 in some of these buildings, they're too small to hold what we think is a K-8. So I guess that comes around to my regular question of when are we going to start talking about K-8s and middle schools? Because it doesn't make sense to me to be doing the district boundary work without doing the K-8, K-5 discussion at the same time.
I thought we were.
I don't know. I thought we were too, but I haven't seen it. It's not coming.
We are. So I mean, I don't have more for you on it at this moment, but I will say, like at a staff level, and as we're in growth mode. So while we've been in just like a shrinking enrollment district, we went to the K-8s and this is prior to me becoming superintendent, right. And we elected not to change that, but to allow those to, you know, to maintain the K-8 communities that had formed. As we're now growing and we have buildings that can't accommodate and have middle grades at the that can offer a robust program, we're back to looking at, do we go back to a K-5 and middle school model as our base model, with the K-8 being the anomaly, or perhaps one per cluster, and we'll bring something, that discussion to DBRAC. And model what that would look like. But as we're growing, our buildings are suited to be able to do K-5s and middle schools with
right.
More.
Which was the issue, right?
But even if we weren't growing, those schools are still not big enough.
They're not big enough.
They're not
right.
big enough.
The buildings aren't big enough, yeah.
There are many of them that aren't just plain aren't big enough.
Yeah.
So.
Correct.
I'm happy to hear this.
Yes, we are bringing that to
Moving that
DBRAC
forward. I love
as a,
it.
as a
So before we move on, I'll just quickly offer a couple comments of my own. Just really, first I wanted to appreciate the solution for Sitten and the recognition that this community needed to stay in place with the Head Start as part of its community, so I appreciate that. But I would just register the concern in terms of the you know, what communities get heard and what I don't know that we've heard from, for example, the Head Start Creative Science families that they would want to move to Lane Middle School. That I don't imagine that they would, and you know, just to back up a little bit further in history before most of our time, you know, Clark existed, it was closed, it was, those students were moved to Harrison Park. Now we have this huge overcrowded school. So then Creative Science and Head Start were moved into the former Clark building, and now here we are at the point again where a Head Start is being moved out. So just want to register my concern about that, and then which are the communities in our district that are heard. So West Sylvan I see is not, it's not an overcrowding issue, but it was a community request. And I get that it's a real issue. It's not that it's not a real issue, but that became a top priority for the district. So that just popped out at me as, you know, on the one hand, we're moving a preschool program to a middle school, and you know, I get that we don't have a lot of great choices here, so I do appreciate that Sitten is being given a significant investment that'll keep that community whole. But I just want us always to be mindful that sometimes it's not the loudest voices that need to be heeded, and I know you're working hard to do that, but you get bombarded with the loud voices.
So I'd just like to comment on that for a moment, if I could, and that is that some of the schools on this list are not there because the community was clamoring for change. Sitten, Harrison Park were not schools that were complaining about the state they were in. They were schools that their leadership and the district saw a need to address. So just know that you've got both types of advocacy happening in this set. And then regarding the Head Start changes, difficult, yes, but you know, every year Head Start has to forecast where they think their population will be in the future, and that was an important overlay when looking for what the potential was. Do you stay squeezed in a building with very little space, or do you move to a place that may even be closer to a number of students that you need to serve? So when we geocoded and looked at where the kids were, it's not that there are no students in need in that area.
Right.
It's not that this will not have a negative hit on some families, but it is a benefit in another place. And I believe Dr. Adair was here tonight. She's homesick, but others that you could speak to in those programs might say to you that, again, they're seeing a silver lining. It was really critically important for them to be able to maintain the full footprint that they have at Kelly this year, and we were able to pull that off, again, with some shared sacrifice. So just know that underneath the reactive moment, there are our best efforts to come up with those proactive solutions that actually move you in a direction that you think might be good for kids as well.
Thank you very much. We really do need to move on, you guys. It's 9:30, so just really quickly, please. Yeah, it would be great if we could move on.
I would really appreciate it if we don't try to pit communities against each other and make comments like were just made. It was completely unnecessary. It was completely unnecessary.
Well, it wasn't meant in that spirit at all. Okay, so let's move on to the next. Thank you very much for all your great work.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Tony.
Let's move on now to a very quick update on the legislative session, which has seen some dramatic events. So this is one of our regular updates, and Superintendent Smith, you want to introduce the item?
Yes, David Williams, who's our Director of Government Relations, will give us a brief update.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, it's only been 2 weeks that the legislature's been in. But boy, what a couple of weeks it's been, for sure. Of course, the big news, which is dominating everything, is the historic resignation of Governor Kitzhaber last Friday and Kate Brown's swearing in, which will take place tomorrow. And that, I kind of leave most of the update to that, because that defines the fact that while the legislature came in, and you probably saw my Friday updates, noticed that they really hit the ground running, but at this point, a lot of things are spinning wheels as people try to figure out where they're going to go. If you look up and down the Capitol halls at the hearings, almost all of them have the stamp of the governor's initiatives on them, from education to energy to transportation, et cetera. And obviously, there is going to be a pretty enormous spillover effect into all of those areas. And so for us in particular, trying to figure out that impact on education policy for the session is where we're at the moment. I will just say that I think that what we've seen so far, and what I would anticipate as we look at sort of the bill sets that are out there, there are three major notable areas of education discussion for the session. There's always all of the other issues that come and go, but I think we've seen sort of three main themes. The budget, of course, is the main theme for us and a main theme for the legislature as they begin to tackle that. You know, we saw the co-chairs make a really valiant second effort, and I think we'll be seeing some upward movement from that as well as we go forward. Cautiously optimistic. Number two is assessment. Obviously, you guys dealt with that this evening, and we have for quite some time here in the district. The legislature is beginning to have that discussion, thankfully, because that's the appropriate governing body to have that conversation is in the legislature. And so they've held a number of hearings on the appropriate role of summative and formative assessment from a standardized nature, and I think that we're going to see that conversation throughout session as they try to tackle with what they think is the appropriate state policy on student assessment. And then lastly, the role of the Oregon Education Investment Board and its status and all of the work that it's done up till now and going forward. So those are sort of, I think, the three major areas of conversation in this legislative session. Again, all kind of on a pause at the moment while people navigate this transition period. Again, Governor Brown will take office tomorrow. Without the usual 2 and 3 month transition time with which to staff up all of her policy advisors and agency heads and all of that work. So she'll have to navigate a huge policy framework from day one without the normal time to bring her own advisors and allies on board. So I imagine there'll be a week or two while people adjust to this new paradigm, and I would suspect that some of that, even that power vacuum, will be filled by the legislative leaders who will take some of these issues on their own, as we saw today with the Clean Fuels Initiative, which did come out of the Senate and is headed to the House. I think some of these initiatives where the legislature is saying, well, it doesn't matter that may have been tied to something else. These are still high priorities for us. So some of that will take place over the next couple of weeks. I would point out this coming Monday is the OSBA COSA Legislative Conference. We have a number of you attending. I'm really happy to have you all coming down, including Student Representative Jaiswal. And I think it'll be a great event. In the morning is going to be sort of their activity over at Willamette University where they do legislative briefings and that sort of thing. And we're setting up appointments for you all for the afternoon, those of you who are attending. Those of you who aren't, just know it would be a fabulous time, and you're really missing out by not coming down to Salem to hang out with me all day. So we look forward to it. And with that, we'll give you back a few minutes of your time, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Questions, anybody? All right, thank you very much. Okay, so last but not least, we've got an exciting information about a new PGE partnership on a solar lease. So Superintendent Smith, you want to introduce this item?
I do. So Tony Magliano, our Chief Operating Officer, and Jeff Hammond, our Energy Program Manager, will give us the update. And this is really exciting. Long time in the making and now happening.
And just to note, we're just procedurally, because we're trying to keep to the protocol of getting information at one meeting and then voting on the next. So we've got some information in our packet. We'll hear about that, and then we can vote on it at our next meeting.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent Smith, chairs, board of directors. Tony Magliano, Chief Operating Officer. Here with me tonight is Jeff Hammond, Building Operations and Energy Manager within the Facilities Department. Projects Jeff has applied his sharp pencil to include our boiler burner project and all the projects that were associated with our recovery zone bond, so the $11 million recovery zone bond project. And he's been working with this solar project that we're going to be presenting to you tonight. That didn't work how I wanted it to work. So complex projects like this, in order for them to come to fruition, it takes partners. because partners bring additional resources, fiscal resources, people, to allow these things to build, to come together and actually happen. And we partnered with Portland Gas and Electric and Bonneville Environmental Foundation to get to this project to where it is today. I don't know why that's doing that. I just wanted to show the board some of the milestones or some history behind solar work we've done. You can see that, 15 years ago we worked with PGE on a very small solar array at Franklin that I think is actually missing from there now. It probably turned into scrap metal for somebody. Again, with Bonneville BEF in 2005. In 2009, that was the largest work we've done to date, where we put solar on 9 new roofs in the school district. And since then, we've been working with folks doing feasibility studies on trying to bring more solar into the school district, and that transpired into meeting with PGE and bringing us to where we are today. I kind of wanted to just give you some scale and comparison between the 2009 project and this project that we're proposing now and that we've been working with PGE and BEF on. You can see the cost and the number of schools. This essentially doubles the capacity of the 2009 work that we did in terms of, from 757 kW to 1.2 megawatts. And you can see, as relative to what it produces, 69 homes for a year to 135 homes for a year, just to give you a perspective of scale. So what are the highlights? Obviously, building partners within the community, fiscal sustainability, student interaction. There's an education component to this that's highlighted in the memo that was provided, along with the renewable energy or the environmental stewardship piece. So, these are some good talking points. Reduces approximately 14,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide over the 25-year life of the arrays. Reduces CO2 emissions, annual greenhouse gas reductions. So it's a huge value to the community. As part of this, we're able to claim 20% of those renewable energy credits. So our contribution to this project is, we could claim 20% of the 14,000 metric tons or 20% of the 1.5 million gallons of gasoline as part of our contribution to the project. So what's happening next? Our SIPA, John Isaacs and his team is coordinating a media kickoff event at Arleta on February 19th. On the 24th, we'll be coming back. On the business agenda will be the revenue agreement with PGE, and our partners will be presenting to the board on that date. Then in June, construction begins, and then in August, construction's complete, and those panels will be up. There will be kiosks in the building where students can interact with them and see what the production, what's going on their building. So that's it in a nutshell at this point. I brought Jeff along. If there's any complex stubby pencil work type questions, Jeff can definitely handle those. All others I'll take on. But I think this is a great opportunity, and I think it's a really good news story for us.
Great, really exciting. Okay, any comments or questions? Bobby? Oh, sorry. You want to go first?
I'm so excited about this, and I think in terms of our bond work, it's a great addition to our story about what we're doing in Portland, and to put it in even a bigger context, because I love the context you put it in, but I was thinking about it today in even a bigger context, that it just feels like this is the next step in terms of what Portland Public Schools has been trying to do in terms of being a good neighbor and working to reduce carbon emissions and pollutants in the air, caring about our own students, our staff in the buildings, you know, like our custodians who used to have to work with those god-awful furnaces that we had from a health perspective. But when you look at some of the things that we've done over the years, we have our TriMet youth passes, and you know, that's taking yellow buses off the road. We switched the buses that we're using from diesel to propane. We converted our heavy oil furnaces to natural gas. I mean, that was huge in terms of the emissions in the air and cost savings. The 9 solar film roofs, the 6 solar panel roofs now. So it just feels like we're setting this great example for our students in terms of being good environmental stewards and why it's important to, you know, be looking at sustainability. But we're really making a difference in terms of quality life in Portland. I mean, we have 100 buildings across this city, and we're taking some real steps to try to reduce our carbon footprint. And it's a great story. So, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Dr. Blau.
I just want to say thank you for bringing this to fruition. You know, when we did the work on the 9 roofs, there was a different environment financially that allowed it to actually pencil out. And I know that when we first passed our bond and looked to begin the work, we took a lot of criticism from community members that we didn't have these in place or that we weren't doing enough solar. In fact, there were calls for us to stop all bond work until we had this in place. So I just want to express appreciation for staff for continuing to work on it to make sure that it pencils out, because while it's important that we do it as a community ethos, I think that our community also says it has to pencil out. You can't just do it for good sake. It has to make sense. So I really appreciate it. And I'm curious to understand a little bit, and neither one of you can take this, how does this pencil out, and are we able to do 6 now, and is that it for our entire bond program, or are there still opportunities as we go forward, or does something have to change in the funding or financing environment for that to happen?
I'll start. So the goal is to always go forward and do more of this, but so much of it to pencil out is depend upon what financial resources are available at the time. And the one thing that allowed this particular project to pencil out was the Clean Wind Development Fund, which only PGE had access to. So, you know, we tried to partner with various other folks, and it doesn't pencil out. In fact, it costs us to get into the game. And in this particular case, we were able to lease out the roof space and actually get like $437,000 over the 25 years. That's not a lot of money, but in terms of being fiscal stewards, it allowed us to pull this off. Did I miss a part of your question?
Well,
the Energy Trust also stepped in with a significant grant to help us, right?
Yeah, so we're hopeful that we've had talks where we can potentially continue this program, but it does rely on the partners that we reference. So a big piece of that is Energy Trust, and then also, like Tony mentioned, is the Clean Wind Development Fund and PG being able to tap into that fund. So if we could, you know, redo that process again, we would look into it moving forward. But a lot of those things have to come together again. So, but we are hopeful that we'll look into those possibilities after we move forward with this. So,
thank you.
Anything else?
Well, I'll just add this as a related. It's just related because I know about it. But David mentioned the Clean Fuels program. So if that actually passes, then the district will have the ability to put more of these on their roof. You can plug your car. Teachers could plug their cars into them and get reimbursed through that program. So, you know, I do believe this is just the beginning of a lot of opportunity.
Great. Well, this is super exciting. We're going to be able to hear from the partners next week and have the opportunity to vote on this. Hearing very positive feedback, obviously. So thank to both of you for all your hard work and for sticking it out till the very end of our agenda. Appreciate that, Jeff, especially since you don't usually have to have that duty. Tony usually has to do it. But anyway, thank you so much. This is super exciting, and look forward to seeing it come to fruition. Yay. All right, so with that, the next meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, February 24th. This meeting is adjourned.